There is a war in the kingdom of spirits. An army of monsters is advancing. There are countless of them. Their leader is a huge red-skinned demon with wings, fangs, huge sharp horns, and silver hair. He soared into the air on his giant wings, his tail covered in spikes, and in his hand he held a menacing staff. The demon let out a threatening roar and shouted that mid-rank spirits would never touch him. Suddenly, a huge red lion with blood-red marks on his face attacked him from behind. With lightning speed, he flew at the demon and with his sharp fangs bit into his hand with all his might, tearing it off along with his wing. At the sight of their wounded leader, all the other monsters were horrified. Before that, no one could harm him. Leo was joined by a bird of incredible size, which soared into the air and struck the monsters with lightning. With just one flap of her wings, many demons were burned, struck by a powerful blow. A huge white dragon appeared in the sky, with a young man standing on its head, holding onto its horns. He was surprised, because he asked his partners to wait for his appearance first. The guy noticed that the demons were more desperate than usual, because he was in the last dungeon, which means his role here had come to an end. Our hero realized it was time to finish, so he thanked his friends and called on his weapon. He grabbed his huge glowing sword in his right hand and raised it to strike. The guy stood very firmly on his dragon's head, casting special spells on his legs. He pushed with force from the mythical animal and headed down like a stone. The landing was so powerful that the entire earth bent under his feet. Our hero boldly looked at his opponents, because his closest associates fought behind him. Having finally defeated the last of the remaining demons, the guy found himself in front of a huge door. The dragon told him that since the entire spirit realm was beyond the threshold, now dungeons connected with the demon realm should not appear here. To which the guy suggested that it would be easier for him to go straight to the world of demons and seal the entrance from there in order to be sure that no one would come beyond the borders again. However, the dragon replied that divine beasts and spirits are different from people. They are weakened by demonic energy, so it is quite problematic for them to enter their realm. Only after this, our hero realized that he could not go further, so he thanked his friends. Finally, his long journey came to an end, with magical fairies flying around happily. The guy spent his last 10 years in this world, so he remembered how everything was in the beginning. The most ordinary day, when nothing foreshadowed trouble, he suddenly disappeared from his world. The last thing he remembered was his beloved mother, who saw him off in the morning with a smile on her face. His mother's birthday was coming soon. He was 25 years old then. He was everything to her. Due to the invasion of the demon kingdom, this world was polluted, so it needed a person who would not be affected by magical energy, so the guy was summoned, which made him very angry. However, after a huge amount of time spent in this world with his friends, the guy accepted him. Now it was time for the friends to say goodbye. They were very grateful to the man for his help. So the dragon pulled its paw forward and summoned a magical object. He said that the human world could use the seed of the tree of peace. It was a worthy gift. The guy promised to raise it as soon as he returned, but for now he hid it. He went through many hard times. He was often lonely. Now it's time to leave this place. The guy returned to his friends, waved to them with a smile on his face, and thanked them for everything. The huge, menacing lion was crying loudly because he had to say goodbye to his loved one. Our hero was embarrassed by this reaction, so he asked the animal not to cry because his tears could cause a whole river to appear. Not only were his friends sad, the guy also didn't know if he could get used to his new life. Will he have enough of a small restaurant where he will be a hero hiding his strength? A green light appeared in the sky above our guy's head and began to slowly descend towards him. Until this moment, he had behaved well, but still could not hold back his tears and hoped that all his friends would be happy. And the green light descended lower and lower, slowly absorbing the guy until it disappeared completely. The great dragon raised his muzzle and touched for the last time the place where his friend had just stood. In the modern world, a fault warning was sounded over the entire area so loudly that everyone could hear it. People were notified that a fissure had appeared in the vicinity, from which a demonic dragon of black flame was about to emerge, which forced people to scatter in different directions. While I was running away from danger alone, military armored trucks arrived in the thick of things. A young man in an elegant suit and long hair tied in a ponytail raised his head and looked at the sky. He commanded the nearest military that they needed to contain the demon as much as possible until the rest of the military arrived, because the rift was very large. The man raised his hand to the radio and commanded someone that his team was in position. All the military understood that this was one of the largest faults that had ever been seen. They were all in their places when it began to explode. Our hero appeared in the middle of the sky of Seoul, with the words that the spatial teleport is worse than the realm of consciousness. Only after that, the guy looked around and was surprised that the entire city below him was in ruins. Right in front of our hero, there was a huge rift that was about to burst. What happened literally a moment later, a huge green bloodthirsty monster emerged from it. But our hero was an unusual guy, so he gathered his strength into a fist, intending to hit the monster. The guy was very surprised that he was unable to collect even half of his usual amount of mana. But even this strength was enough for him, so the hero fell on the monster's head. There was a huge explosion in the sky, which immediately attracted the attention of all people. The long-haired commander-in-chief turned around in shock at the sound, trying to understand what had just happened. The hero was still in the sky and was amazed that his strength was enough to handle the black flame dragon. Suddenly, some kind of notification appeared in front of the guy saying that there was a system error. The guardian god is trying to call him to find out who he is. The hero was clearly surprised by this turn of events, because this had never happened to him before. Our guy thought it was someone trying to take him away again. He may have been weak before, but now he is a completely different person. The guy simply pulled his hand up and tore the mark from the heavenly canvas. He squeezed the magic letters in his palm with all his might. This turned out to be enough to completely destroy him, and the hero himself could hurry home. The gathered people looked at the sky and could not understand why the black flame dragon and the rift suddenly disappeared. Neither the military nor the main commander had ever heard of a rift simply disappearing before. Our hero lay on the grass and tried to tell the world that he was about to die of hunger. Kostya rolled on the ground from side to side and shouted that it was truly absurd to starve the savior of the world. And he answered him that spirits do not need food or other life-sustaining substances. The guy tried to argue for some more time, but realized that it was useless, so he abruptly jumped to his feet. He screamed that this was why he needed to stop doing this for his own survival. He could not survive on fruits and vegetables alone. The guy demanded meat, so he ran off in search of him, leaving the great dragon alone. Kostya's mother stood and listened to the fact that in a couple of months the building would be demolished, so she needed to find a new place and prepare for eviction. The man tried to explain this to the woman, but she did not want to listen to him and turned away. He was very tired of these constant persuasions, because this area is a fault zone and it is very dangerous here. The compensation is very decent, so he was not interested in how anyone could refuse such a thing. But the woman did not pay attention to his words and offered to eat something before leaving. She packed the container and talked about how she didn't care about money. Her son disappeared 10 years ago, so she must wait here for him. The man was amazed by what he heard and did not know what to answer, so he stood silently. He sat at the table and watched as the woman prepared food for him. The man said that the police must find her son, and the woman could not do this on her own. These words made our hero's mother very angry. She turned towards the visitor in anger. The woman suddenly froze, opened her eyes in surprise, and could not say anything. It was at this very moment that the doors to her restaurant opened, and someone she had not seen for a very long time appeared in the doorway. Our hero returned home after a long journey and stood on the threshold with tears in his eyes. The woman was still in shock from what she saw. She could not say a word. She only slowly backed away. Suddenly, the strength left her legs, and mother slowly began to sink to the floor. After some time, evening came in the city and it became dark outside. The owner came to the door of the restaurant and hung a sign saying it was closed for the day. At this time, our hero was sitting at the table and felt embarrassed and joyful. He looked straight ahead and could not believe that his mother was here. The woman was very glad to return, but could not hold back her tears. She slowly extended her wrinkled hands towards the young guy and wrapped them around his palm. The guy was very happy about this manifestation of feelings, because he had not held his mother's hand for a very long time. As soon as he grew up, he tried not to do it because he was embarrassed. The hostess cupped her son's face in her hands and could not understand whether she was sleeping or whether all this was happening in reality. Kostya tried to explain to his mother that he himself did not fully understand where he had disappeared to. Apparently, he was sucked into the fissure. When he woke up in this world, it took him a while to understand what he wanted because of the ruins. The guy lied to his mother because he was afraid that she would not believe that her adult son had gone to save the world in the kingdom of spirits. The woman could not stop crying, but these were tears of happiness. At that moment, she recalled the time when she walked the streets and handed out leaflets with photographs of her missing child. They depicted a fairly old guy who smiled sincerely. Every evening, the woman returned home and walked into her son's empty room. At some point, she thought that he had run away from home on his own. Kostya hugged his mother and reassured her, saying that the worst was over. Using his magic, the guy decided to check the health of his mother. He was surprised that her stamina and energy were below average. Even processing did not give such an effect, which meant the woman was sick. Kostya suggested going to the hospital to check the health of his pale mother. However, she refused and seemed to know her body better than anyone. In fact, the woman realized that her cancer cells had spread in her body. She went to the hospital too late. This news greatly saddened her. The woman wanted to know how much time she still had left to live. The doctor suggested about 6 months, so the owner did not want to spend the rest of her life in the hospital when her Kostya finally returned home. So the woman smiled and shook her head from side to side, thus showing that everything was fine with her. She was very happy to see her son, who was considered dead, so she offered to set the table for him. Kostya realized that his mother was hiding something, but decided not to torment her with questions yet, so he pretended to believe it and went to his room. The guy calmly changed his clothes, sat down on the floor, and began to look around the room from all sides. He looked first at the ceiling, at the wall, at the dust that lay on his things. The young man realized that this place had also been empty for quite a long time, but he was pulled out of his thoughts by the voice of his mother, who was calling for dinner. Kostya went down to the first floor, and there on the table were several plates of very appetizing-smelling food waiting for him. The guy was amazed that his mother managed to prepare it all so quickly. The woman was only glad to hear such words, so she also put her son's favorite meatloaf on the table. She admitted that she was waiting for his return all the time because she didn't know when the guy would return, so she cooked his favorite dish every day. The hero was very embarrassed by these words. They warmed his soul. The young man decided to remember old habits and took a perilla leaf in his hand. He then began to carefully equip the chopsticks and place more and more different foods on it. In the end, there was some rice, meat, hot spices, and garlic on the leaf. Then our hero carefully rolled everything into a ball shape and put it in his mouth. The guy was delighted with the taste of homemade food, which he had not felt for many years. Kostya gobbled up the food on both cheeks, and his mother was only happy with his appetite. Suddenly, the guy stopped for a second from the feelings that he was overwhelmed. He was so glad to remain at home in the company of his beloved mother that tears rolled from his eyes. Our hero was incredibly grateful to his mother. She only asked him to eat more slowly. The guy recalled that he was able to survive only because he thought about his mother, so he would not allow the only person who supported him all the time to suffer. The rest of the evening passed with such sweet conversations. At this time, somewhere else, a huge white wolf was asking his master why he left the earth. Didn't he have a reason to leave the place of the guardian god to him? However, he only replied that the brave hero, who returned to his homeland, would have to defend the land. The wolf was surprised that the fate of the entire planet was in the hands of an ordinary person named Kostya. The owner continued to convey information about the new protector to his animal, but he still did not cease to be surprised. And at this time it was deep night in our guy's city. Kostya woke up, sat up straight on the bed and yawned sweetly, scratching his head. The guy looked at his mother, who was lying next to him, fast asleep. The hero was amazed that the woman's pain was so strong that she winced even in her sleep. The guy realized that he couldn't waste a minute. He needed to collect information as quickly as possible. Therefore, Kostya got out of the house in the middle of the night and went in search of any information. The guy stopped after he felt the demonic energy of the summoned dungeon. He had a very bad feeling, but he couldn't just let it go. Although the energy is quite weak, in the future he could emerge like a creature, so he decided to scout out the situation. He quietly got closer to the energy source and saw a group of people with strange equipment. The guy was surprised that the Koreans learned how to manage dungeons just 3 years after the Great Cataclysm. He guessed that was why the demonic energy seemed so weak. Kostya decided to find out everything anyway, so he pushed off from the building with all his strength and flew past people in suits with lightning speed. No one noticed anything, but one of them thought something passed nearby. And at this time, our hero was already on the other side of the magic gate. He found himself in something unknown to him, and a huge magic circle was shining in the sky, in the center of which there was something. The guy had never been here, but he immediately realized that he was in a summoned dungeon. Kostya knew that the hearts of ostriches have healing properties, so he would not need additional materials to neutralize the demonic energy. The guy was also happy that he had come up with an excellent dish for his mother. Our hero portrayed a good plan, so he smiled bloodthirstily. He walked calmly among these strange animals, and the ostriches hid their heads in the ground out of fear. This allowed our hero to slowly look around. After some time, the guy reached a huge magic circle that was located on the ground. In the center of the summoning circle, there was a small cabinet on which lay a magical artifact. The guy concentrated his power in his hand, collecting it in the center of his palm. Then he released all the energy and directed it directly towards the magical artifact. There was a huge explosion, which left a crater in the ground. After destroying the magical energy, the guy was about to catch several ostriches, but suddenly, a system notification appeared in front of him again. It reported that force was used that exceeded that allowed by the system. The guardian god tried to call our hero to find out who he is, so a huge magic circle formed under the guy's feet. Kostya obviously had no intention of going anywhere, so he hit the seal with all his might, destroying it. At this time, he was watched by a huge white wolf, who was shocked by what was happening. He had been following the hero for some time, but did not at all expect such a turn of events. Kostya shouted to the invisible guard that if he wanted to see him, then let him come to his house himself. But not now, but a little later, because now he has other things to do. The guy needed to quickly collect the ostrich hearts before this dungeon disappeared. The animals clearly felt threatened when they noticed our hero, so they screamed in horror. They didn't have a chance because our hero rushed past one of the birds with lightning speed, easily tearing the heart out of its chest. The guy held it in his hand and was happy about such a large catch. He thought it would make a great breakfast, so he sent the heart to his hiding place. After all the business was finished, it was time to return home. Kostya pushed off the ground with all his might and headed back to the teleportation circle, landing in his world in the morning. He was too attached to this place to simply leave. Suddenly, the hero felt that something strange was happening around him. He began to look around and noticed that space was being distorted. Kostya immediately thought that this same guard had come after his soul. The guy tried to stop his movement because he wanted to get home, but he failed to do this. In the world, a huge white wolf protector god named Carnus de Lupus slept peacefully. Our hero has moved from modern soul straight into the universe of a huge animal. The guy immediately tried to look around and understand who called him. He noticed a huge white wolf lying calmly in front of him. He couldn't believe his eyes. The guy pointed his finger at the huge animal and said that it seemed too weak to him, to which the wolf remarked that all people were rude. He introduced himself as a protector who had been watching over planet Earth for 10,000 years. The guard could see that our hero was 35 years old. He had reached level 99, and all his other indicators were almost at the maximum, which he had not seen before. The wolf said that he didn't have long left, so he had to secretly monitor the man. But the guy was more interested in why he was chosen among all the people on the planet. The huge wolf answered him that he had received a divine revelation from his master. Humans are selfish creatures who don't care about anyone but themselves. Even knowing this, he kept his promise to his master and protected them for 10,000 years. However, he had already exceeded all his limits, magical power, and his life force was approaching zero and would soon disappear. The wolf thought that he needed to do what he himself wanted. It would be nice for the last moment of life while he was approaching death. Our hero immediately realized that the huge wolf was telling the truth. He was very angry. But these were just the words of a guardian who had already despaired and lost his essence. The wolf admitted that he changed his mind after he saw the karma of our main character. This is the ratio of bad and good deeds that people do throughout their lives. So 3 years ago, during the Great Cataclysm, the wolf felt a huge threat and gave all people a system similar to a game. So all people could easily see their karma, and the guard himself never set limits for its assessment. But our hero still went beyond its limits. Based on his spiritual strength, stemming from this very karma, it seemed to the guard that our hero would be quite suitable for the role of the next guardian. He looked at Kostya and allowed me to ask him some questions. The guy said he had a few and the guard waited patiently. The guy just started shouting that the magician had gone crazy and was simply trying to give away the position of the guardian through the legacy. The huge white spirit was shocked by such an unexpected reaction from this strange man. The hero continued to shout that the work of the guardian was a complete scam and deception. He looked the wolf in the eyes and said with confidence that he was not going to do this. The guardian told him that it was too late to refuse this work. These words brought our hero into a slight stupor because he did not understand what was happening. Suddenly, a window appeared in front of him, indicating that the ceremony of inheriting the guardian of the planet would now begin. But the hero did not want to become a guardian at all, so he tried to free himself. He summoned all his power into one place, trying to break the cycle of inheritance. Even the wolf was amazed at how powerful the energy was under the control of a common man. Kostya didn't understand why they were forcing him to go through the heritage ceremony without even explaining anything. He noticed something strange and realized that his wrist was chained. Not only the wrist, but all other limbs were shrouded in magical chains. It was a complex chain magic circle, so the guy couldn't just break it with his magic power. The wolf didn't understand what the point was in being so angry and wasting other people's time. However, the guy said that it was obvious to him that the guardian wolf would soon die, so he tried to make him the guardian himself, without even asking his opinion. The guy didn't believe that this was really what parents do, protecting people and watching over them. He asked the wolf to let him go, just send him back home. However, the keeper replied that he was obliged to find the receiver precisely because he protected people and watched over them. After that, he will need a new guardian, and Kostya can become one. The guy noticed that the status of a guardian makes him immortal, so it was easier for him to stop and continue to be a guardian himself. The wolf replied that he was given eternal life in exchange for protecting the world. It is difficult for him to recover on Earth, where there is no longer any spirit or divine beasts, because the planet and the guardian are one. Even if he is destined to cease to exist, The Guardian cannot simply stand by and do nothing. After this explanation, Kostya admitted that he did not intend to be the Keeper's successor. He tried to call upon his magical power again and free himself from his shackles. The guy said he didn't want someone like a wolf to rule his life again. This time, making even more effort, Kostya decided to open the circle of movement. After that, his favorite huge sword flew from storage into our hand. The wolf was amazed that the guy had enough strength to use his magical abilities. At this time, our hero had already freed his limbs with the help of a magic sword, after which he gathered his strength and delivered a lightning-fast series of powerful blows. Literally a moment later, all the seals and chains were destroyed. The hero was free from them. After this, the guy decided to defend himself, so he took the sword in both hands and put it in front of him. The wolf was furious because it was completely impossible to have a normal conversation with this guy, to which Kostya replied that it was precisely with the wolf himself that it was impossible to have a normal conversation. The Guardian said that the guy turned out to be exactly the same as all the other people he was so tired of. He only cares about himself, and if he doesn't see his own benefit in something, he turns a blind eye to it. To which the guy noted that for such a person who wants a normal life, this is a good compliment. Kostya realized that he needed to calm down and think, because even though the Guardian had become weaker, he was still strong. After that, the guy remembered that his friend had a dog, and when dealing with dogs, you can't fight with them directly. Kostya heard that dogs don't like to brush their teeth, so he climbed into the mouth of a huge wolf, after which he squeezed out a tube of mint paste to the animal and ordered him no longer to call upon the powers of other people. The wolf didn't want to give up quickly, so the guy had to get a second tube of mint paste. Even despite this, the old keeper still did not want to give up his position. Therefore, the guy remembered the conversation with his dragon, who never wanted to become a guardian. Such confidence from an old acquaintance convinced the guy that he too should never become a keeper. Kostya was distracted by these memories, so he did not notice the most important thing. At this time, the huge guardian wolf calmly freed himself and spat out the toothpaste from his mouth. He decided to use a different tactic in relation to this guy, so he asked Kostya to become a guardian for the sake of his mother. He will be able to cure her illness with the help of divine power if he becomes a guardian. Since the guardian is responsible for the life of all creatures in his world, he is able to heal any disease. These words made our hero stop and think carefully, after which he looked at the guardian and asked him to save his mother. In return, he promised to do everything for him, except become the new guardian. The wolf was surprised by this answer. It seemed to him that it would be more logical to become a guardian himself and save his mother on his own. However, Kostya replied that he did not know when he would get used to his new abilities, so he asked the current keeper for help. So with a sparkle in his eyes, he asked the wolf to take care of his mother first. The guy again summoned a circle of movement and pulled out his huge sword from it. With one single blow, he cut through space and opened a passage to his world. The Guardian was amazed at the strength of this hero because cutting space is not so easy. And at this time, Kostya, already joyful, ran to his home restaurant and at the same time asked the wolf to reduce his size. The Guardian did not fully understand why he was listening to this guy, but he began to rapidly decrease in size. Eventually, he turned into a rather cute little white dog. Kostya was satisfied with the size of the dog, so he asked first of all to look at the condition of his mother. The Guardian already knew that the sleeping woman did not have much time to live. With one look at her, the wolf immediately said that she had no more than 6 months left. The guy still refused to become the next guardian, so he thought about a plan of action. The cute dog sat next to him all this time and looked at him with a sad face. After which he said that he no longer has divine powers, so he uses his life energy to compensate for this, because it is too risky to use the remnants of life force without a good reason and receivers. Therefore, the guy needed to come up with a solution to this problem. After which Kostya came up with the brilliant idea that vitality is similar to endurance, so the dog just needs to eat something to help him restore energy. He agreed, but immediately warned that he was not going to eat dog food. Our hero had already put on an apron and went to the kitchen to prepare food. There were definitely creatures on Earth like divine beasts or spirits that possessed magical powers. They used to live freely, but the stupidity of people led to their disappearance. And now it was their turn, and the whole world was in danger. At this time, our hero stood calmly in the kitchen and thought about what to cook. And the little wolf stood next to him and did not understand what this man was up to. After these words, the guy woke up from his stupor and turned his attention to the furry animal. On the table in front of him lay the seed of the tree of the world, and the hero did not know what to do with it. Our man was surprised that the wolf immediately recognized this magical artifact. In fact, he didn't think that the guardian would only help such a magical object to be restored. It turned out that the guy did not understand the full value of this magic tree. Thanks to the words of the wolf, he found out that the seed of the tree of peace cannot be obtained anywhere on Earth. Kostya became hungry at the thought that this was actually considered a rare delicacy. But the wolf was still interested in where such a strong thematic artifact came from in the hands of an ordinary person. After which all the memories of the last 10 years immediately came to the guy's head. But first of all, he decided to get into his magical storage. Before this, he would sometimes prepare the magic tree. But if compared to preparing it for consumption, then to restore it, it would be more effective to grow it first. Growing the world tree and saving life with the help of the big world tree are the responsibilities of the guardian. The wolf said that he had 6 months left, and this time was not enough to fully grow the tree of the world. After these words, the guy came up with a great idea, so he asked the wolf to leave the kitchen. The guardians were not used to being treated this way, so he was surprised by such an order. He didn't have the patience to wait, so the guy simply threw the little dog out the kitchen door. The great wolf was dizzy after such a flight. He sat and slowly came to his senses. He just had time to think about everything that had happened, which is what the keeper was doing now. He wondered whether his master had made the right decision when he chose the hero who came from the earth. The wolf believed that he would never be able to believe in people after they, through their own stupidity, destroyed such a beautiful place. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, our hero turned on the gas and lit one of the burners on the stove. Then he began to fry something in a frying pan, even sticking out his tongue with zeal. The guy was glad that he still hadn't lost his cooking skills. He's done with the bulk of the work. Now it's his turn to tackle the special ingredient. These special ingredients contained the heart of a magical ostrich from another world. The guy was having fun because if you eat this heart just like that, you could die. He had to put a lot of effort into cutting it in half with his sharp axe. The guy skillfully wielded the knife, and blood flew in all directions. After some time, he came out of the kitchen covered in blood and called the keeper. The wolf was clearly not happy with this appearance of our hero. However, this still did not stop him from following him into the kitchen. And there was a wonderful portion of food waiting for him, which was put in a dog bowl and decorated with green peas on top. The great wolf was furious that they dared to offer him dog food, despite his appearance. The keeper immediately said that although the dish looks relatively normal, it is still the heart of an ostrich. He knows that it is all imbued with demonic energy and poison. However, the guy did not get angry or upset because of these words. He assumed that the wolf would say this, so he called the guardian Belyash, which again enraged him. The guy bowed to the white dog and asked him to try the freshly prepared dish. The guardian wolf looked at this man and did not understand what he was up to. He was sure that the guy would try to deceive him somehow in order to save his mother. In any case, he needed human help, so the wolf bent down and began to eat. After the first couple of bites, some strange feeling pierced right through him. The great keeper realized that this food turned out to be incredibly tasty. He didn't understand since when the heart of a magical beast became so tasty, because he was sure that because of the poison and energy it was not edible. Kostya was happy and understood that the whole point was how he spent the last 10 years. About 10 years ago, he had just entered the spirit realm. At that time, he was terribly emaciated. Bones were visible from under the skin. He spoke to his deceased grandmother right in front of the river Styx. She came ashore from the river and stretched out her flabby hands to him. The guy turned out to be so thin because there is no food in the spirit world. He ate only fruit for a whole month. The young man sincerely believed that in this way he would soon die of hunger. He was having a dialogue with his grandmother when he noticed something strange. Suddenly, she became enormous in size, her eyes glowing with rage because someone dared to starve her grandson. She ordered the young man to get up and promised to help him. This is roughly how our hero explained his cooking abilities to the great guardian. Despite the obvious nonsense of this story, the wolf's vitality began to recover. The guy promised that he would cook for the guardian as much as he wanted, as long as he didn't need to treat his mother or protect anything. The wolf was glad that they agreed on at least something. The keeper liked the dish so much that he asked our hero to give him a refill. And the guy was only glad that someone liked his cooking. That's why he called the wolf Belyash and gently stroked his head with his finger. A global company that is now at the top of the Korean economy and has a high status throughout the world. The second son of the executive director, Sergei, sits in front of us. Now he is once again faced with a difficult situation. At this time, in our hero's restaurant, he woke up his mother and called her to have breakfast. The woman woke up and saw in front of her a cute little white dog waving its tail cheerfully. She looked down at her leg and saw that it was all covered in dog saliva. A couple of seconds after this, the dog approached the woman and began to lick her leg. After a while, the woman dressed in her home clothes and went down to the kitchen. The dog was sitting under the table and eating from a bowl. The woman was surprised that the dog appeared, because her son had previously been afraid of animals. But the guy replied that the dog would not hurt them to protect the house. The woman was upset. She realized that they were living in very dangerous times. But the guy distracted her from these sad thoughts because he prepared a wonderful breakfast for his mother. In front of her were several plates, each of which was full of delicious food. The woman was amazed that her son personally prepared all this for her. She also immediately noticed that the guy began to cook much better than he had done before. The woman took the chopsticks in her hand, then carefully grabbed a piece of food from the plate, after which she slowly put it in her mouth and began to enjoy the taste of homemade food. She was lucky, because she had not yet seen the mess that was going on at the car wash. Our hero just remembered about him and realized that he needed to clean up quickly. The woman was so glad to have her son back that she could now trust him with her restaurant and relax. And he was glad that his mother could now live in peace. At this time, the keeper called him from under the table and asked for more. He said that he had done a good job and the woman should no longer be in pain. After all, he licked her leg all night and thus treated her for her illness. Mother just remembered about the new family member and decided to pat him on the head. The woman asked her son if the dog needed dog food, horrifying the keeper. Kostya promised to come by later for groceries and look for food for the dog as well. At this time, at the corporation, Sergei was sitting in a chair with a sad face. Then the door to his office opened and a young girl in a strict black suit entered. She said that she was unable to complete his task and find out the cause of the incident. The whole team was still sorting it out, but it had already become clear that the video surveillance system had not stopped working. Even the workers who were at the scene at the time said that everything happened just like that, without any reason. The girl listened very carefully to the testimony of each of them. Such a report from his subordinate clearly did not suit the young boss Sergei. The guy lowered his head to his chest and asked the girl if there would be any consequences this time. To which she replied that he would be called either a diamond spoon or the mediocrity of the family, most likely. But the guy thought that the girl was mocking him and not answering seriously. At the moment, he wished he didn't have a nickname at all, rather than have even more terrible ones appear. He had spent 500 billion won on this dungeon, so he was now worried about failing. After a while, Sergei calmed down and asked the girl if his father and older sister were aware of what had happened. And after receiving a negative answer, I was glad that this was at least one piece of good news. He admitted that he was too excited at first. Even though he was awakened, mediocrity will always remain mediocrity. The girl was unpleasant and sad to hear such words from her boss. After which Secretary Diana said that the chairman hates people who say things like that. The girl added that Sergei is the only one who is making efforts to resume dungeon trips, and even if he decides to stay, then let him find a more appropriate reason for this. These words touched Sergei. He was glad that Diana was alone on his side. The guy was looking through the list of members of the dungeon campaign and asked what happened to the first group, which was mobilized 6 hours after the incident. To which the girl replied that this group was still nearby. They are resting after studying the dungeon route. Nothing has leaked to the press yet, and she has already sent the recordings from the CCTV cameras to Sergei's tablet. The guy just found this data and decided to look at it carefully. He chose one video, which should have been the first, judging by the time. The young man hesitated a little at first, but then collected his thoughts and pressed play. Sergei and Diana watched the recordings together. At first, nothing special happened. However, after some time, something on the recording caught the young man's attention. The guy paused the recording and couldn't believe his eyes. All equipment was disabled, the portal was destroyed, people rushed in different directions to escape. The young man thought that this was definitely very strange for a standard hike. The sound was definitely not the natural destruction of a dungeon, and it didn't sound like a weapon either. It was more like the sound of something being destroyed by magical energy. He prepared for this campaign and trained countless hunters. After some thought, Sergei decided that he needed to see everything in person. Therefore, the young man got up from his chair and went to the exit, asking the secretary to prepare a car for him. After which, at the meeting, the department heads discussed the latest case. They came to the conclusion that the problem arose and did not depend on them. If the trial goes according to the worst-case scenario, then the losses will not be calculated in 1 billion won, but in tens of billions of won. Absolutely none of those present were delighted with this outcome of events. After this, Sergei noticed that it was already late in the evening, so he thanked everyone who participated in such a long meeting. The next time they were supposed to gather, when the preparations for the trial and the materials for it were already ready. For today, everyone was free and could go home. Sergei spent several days at work, so when he came out into the bright sun, his eyes watered. Diana and her boss walked slowly down the street, discussing the weather. The young man was upset that everyone was suffering because of him. He was very ashamed that he made his secretary wait for more than 18 hours. To which the girl replied that she was ready to follow her boss. The main thing is that he does not stay. These small words of support greatly inspired Sergei. Sometime after the start of the walk, the young people stopped in the middle of the road. Sergei admitted that he still has at least one very good side in his office. Immediately after that, the thought of his father and older sister looking down on him came into his mind. Their success weighed heavily on him from a moral point of view, almost from birth. Before these thoughts, the young man again fell into a stupor and did not move for some time. He woke up only when his secretary called out to him, standing in the middle of the road. The girl decided to cheer up her boss and offered to have a snack somewhere before returning. Sergei tried to refuse such an offer because he was embarrassed. What Diana noticed that her boss always scratches his forehead when he is nervous. He also always goes to bed to relieve stress. Sergei was surprised at how well his secretary knew him, so he agreed to have a snack. The girl knew a good place nearby, so the young people got into the car. The secretary was driving and taking her boss to a small restaurant with very tasty food. She looked around and wondered if all the buildings were destroyed because they were in the area. After some time in the trip, when Sergei had already begun to fall asleep, Diana said that they had arrived. Of course, it turned out to be our protagonist's family restaurant, which was welcoming customers for the first time since he returned. Diana asked for a table for two while the boss looked around. The girl looked at the menu carefully, and Kostya thought that he had come across very interesting visitors. Suddenly, the voice of the keeper was heard in his head, who offered to show the guy the visitor status windows. The young man did not really like the fact that he was talking to him using telepathy. However, he still agreed to look at the visitor status windows. He saw that Diana was 30 years old. She was a simple, kind swordsman of level 34. Sergei is 32 years old. He is a rare good magic archer of level 25. Immediately after this, Kostya realized that his intuition had not let him down, but he still did not understand why people like them would come here. The voice of the guardian in his head is that people like them are called awakened. The guy was angry that the wolf could even read his thoughts, but he said that he was simply too predictable. 3 years ago, after great capitalism, magical powers or separate classes began to awaken in some people, just like in the game. Kostya thought that the awakened ones could give hope to people after the invasion of demons. At this time, he reflected on this topic and observed his unusual visitors. He mentally asked the guardian how strong these people were right now, to which he replied that they are among the 10% strongest among all people and 30% among hunters. After this information, Kostya decided that it would be difficult for them to resist even mid-rank demonic monsters. Diana wanted to place an order but was surprised that there was only one dish on the menu. One girl gave not only the quantity, she was also surprised by its price. Kostya also saw the price on the menu for the first time, which has doubled over the past 10 years. The guy thought it was too expensive, but the girl said it was too cheap for the modern world. Sergei noted that the restaurant would go bankrupt if it sold food at such a low price. Hearing these words, our hero's mother came out of the kitchen into the restaurant hall. The guy was very surprised that the prices of all goods had risen so much, which surprised everyone present. The woman replied that she had been working for the last 10 years, not for the sake of income, but so that her son would have a place to return to. The woman surprised the unusual visitors of the restaurant with her heartbreaking story. Despite everything that had happened, Diana noticed that the kitchen smelled very tasty. Sergei also liked the smell, so he asked to prepare a very spicy dish and bring drink. The girl refused to drink with him because there was no spare driver. At this time, Kostya was in a stupor because of how quickly events were unfolding. But his mother called him from the kitchen and asked him to help, so the guy had to force himself to move. Kostya approached his mother and asked if they were selling their food too cheap. But the woman did not listen to him at all. She was only glad that visitors appeared for the first time in a long time. She came up with a brilliant idea, which she immediately voiced to her son. Since these were the first visitors since the guy returned, the woman invited him to cook the food himself. The guy was a little shocked by what was happening, but the grandmother wished him luck in his thoughts. At this time, at the other end of the city, something strange was happening at an abandoned construction site. The man smiled bloodthirstily as his victims begged him to spare them. He said they didn't have to make him out to be some kind of crazy person, just answer one question. He was interested in which of these two connected people loved the other more. None of them could say a word, they just bowed in silence. The guy was very amused by this reaction of this couple. He looked down at them, then straightened his jacket and grinned. The guy admitted that the absence of love is nothing to hide. Therefore, he decided to choose his first victim at random. It turned out to be a guy. At this time, strange visitors were still dining at our hero's restaurant. Kostya put his hands in front of him and very persistently refused something. At this time, Sergei argued with him and, on the contrary, very persistently offered to take something. It turned out to be a check signed by him for 5 million won, which was simply a huge amount. Kostya was shocked that he had never seen so much money before. Sergei continued to persuade the guy to take the money, but he refused, citing his conscience. However, the unusual guest continued to insist that this was payment not only for food, but also for the time spent. For a person like him who can't even eat normally because of work. The guy had tears in his eyes and then said that perhaps today he ate for the last time. Perhaps this was the last cooked meal that even his father could not give him before he died. In addition, the combination dish that the chef prepared was very tasty. These words spoken to the visitors pierced our hero to the very heart. Kostya even took Sergei's hand because of how pleased he was to hear such praise. After these words, he gladly accepted the money, although it was still too much money. After this, the young man escorted the dear guests beyond the threshold of the establishment and said goodbye to them. He was immensely happy that his food was praised and that he earned money. At this time, the curtain pulled back and our hero's mother came out of the kitchen. The guy immediately ran closer to her and showed the check that the visitors had left for him. The woman wanted to praise her son for making some money, but something caught her attention. Seeing the amount of 5 million won, her eyes literally fell out of their sockets. The woman was amazed that her son was able to bring such a large sum. The guy said that they bought a food subscription, and they liked it so much that they are going to come here all the time, so they paid the whole amount at once, so they will have to serve them in the future when they come. The woman was so shocked that she believed this fake story. She returned her eyes to their place, and Kostya regretted that he continued to lie to his mother. The woman was still happy with this money, because she just needed to pay for the institute. Our hero didn't even immediately understand what kind of institute we were talking about, so he asked his mother again. The woman explained that she would need to inform him of his return, buy basic necessities and change clothes to new ones. The guy decided not to add to his mother's problems, so he went to the law enforcement center himself. Since people now disappear quite often, the procedure for restoring status is not so long. While Kostya was thinking about this, he came across a center worker who offered to help. The man looked at the documents and said that he had already collected everything he needed. He just needed to scan them. While he was telling this, the guy listened attentively, but something attracted his attention. The worker had a bracelet with a magic stone on his left wrist. The man said that everything was in order with the documents, and at 35 years old, Kostya looked quite young. After that, he asked the young man whether he had ever used magical engineering procedures, to which he received a negative answer. Kostya justified himself by saying that he had previously lived in the mountains for a long time, so he had never heard anything about them. The worker explained that magical engineering fully corresponds to its name. It is a new science that combines magic and the powers of magic stones. As an example, he demonstrated his bracelet, which was made with her help. However, this bracelet is not an artifact, although it is very similar. Only awakened ones who are able to control magical powers can use artifacts. But things made with the help of magical engineering can also be used by those who are not able to control it. Therefore, these bracelets can be called simple imitation of artifacts, after which the worker said that such items could be bought at the hunter's market. However, he did not have time to warn Kostya that he could be deceived there, and he had already rushed off. The guy walked away happy sometime after purchasing a mobile phone, but it turned out to be a hoax. The guy hoped that it was a bargain. He was not at all aware of the current prices, although he still had a whole 1 million won left, so he could go and buy his mother an artifact for protection. The guy walked through the city and tried to remember what the employee there told him about magically created objects. After some time, Kostya reached the hunter's market, where he could buy them. He held a small pebble in his hands and was amazed that such a tiny stone cost as much as 3 million won, although they were lying everywhere in the dungeons of the spirit kingdom. He asked the seller if there was anything cheaper, to which he replied that they had the lowest prices in the area. After that, Kostya said that he needed protection from a person or from a middle-ranked demonic monster. The seller noticed that a few million won would not be enough to protect against a mid-ranked demonic monster. It would require at least several 100 million won. The guy was amazed that the rubbish that could be found just walking through the realm of spirits was so expensive here. Suddenly, the voice of the guardian was heard in his head, calling him very persistently. The wolf was still angry about his new nickname Belyash, which our hero awarded him. Despite this, the keeper still warned Kostya that a looter had broken into their restaurant. The seller was surprised that such a young guy managed to share something with the looters. After all, the marauders are the awakened ones who, over time, have lost their way. But before he could finish speaking, the young guy who had just stood in front of him disappeared. The man didn't even have time to notice when he disappeared, because just a moment ago he was still standing right in front of him. And at this time, Kostya was already rushing home as fast as he could to protect his mother from danger. The young man tried to run as quickly as possible, afraid that he might not make it in time. He had just returned home, had just reunited with his family. How could he lose them the very next day? At this time, the villain who had just recently killed the couple was holding a red candy in his hands. He opened his mouth wide, then put the ball on his tongue and swallowed it without chewing. He then licked his fingers, which still tasted like candy, after which he bent over, slowly stretched his back and stiff joints. He grinned at some thought that had just occurred to him, after which he began to laugh under his breath and walked with a cheerful gait away from the murder scene, closer to the city center. The guy was clearly in a good mood. He was singing and dancing, carrying something in a black bag. The main character's mother was cleaning the kitchen when someone entered the restaurant. The woman at first thought that it was her son who had come, so she was surprised when she saw another man on the threshold. He was also surprised that he was called by a different name. In fact, his name was Misha. The guy calmly entered the restaurant and was amazed that only one dish was served there. But the woman's attention was more attracted by the fact that he came here with a suspicious package in his hands. The guy didn't care about this at all. He just clarified whether the restaurant specialized in this one dish. After which he calmly walked up to the table, pushed back the chair and sat down on it, and threw the black bag directly on the floor next to him. Something in this package haunted the woman, the smell or its color. At one glance at this bag, from which hair was sticking out, the woman fell into a stupor and could not move. Misha immediately realized that the woman had noticed what was in his package. Therefore, he said that if the food in this restaurant was tasty, then he would kill her painlessly. And if he doesn't like the food, then the boss's mother will end up just like these unfortunate people. The woman immediately went to the kitchen to cook. The marauder continued to smile and sat calmly at the table, crossing his legs. The guardian immediately felt that this man was clearly a marauder, so he became very angry. He looked at Misha and used his ability to see the window of his skills. The guy was 29 years old. He belonged to the class of ordinary assassins. He was evil and had level 33. Judging by Misha's karma points, he didn't try very hard to hide. This is not the guy who was worth getting into without using divine punishment. At that moment, the marauder also noticed the puppy, so she decided to play with him and called him to her. He didn't even have time to do anything when the door to the restaurant suddenly opened with force. At this time, Misha's attention was distracted by the guardian, who lay on his back and pretended to be a cutie. Therefore, when our hero appeared on the threshold of the restaurant, the looter perceived him only as a noisy brat. He continued to call the dog, but he turned his back to him. Moreover, he demonstratively and without turning around, walked in the opposite direction, closer to Kostya, who had entered. Only after this did the looter pay attention to who entered the restaurant. All his clothes were covered in the blood of the people he had killed before. And from a black bag standing next to the chair, evidence of his atrocities peeked out. The hero silently, and with a menacing look, approached the marauder, mentally asking the guardian where his mother was. He also asked the wolf if he could erase people's memories, calling him by his real name for the first time. After this, the keeper realized that the guy was very serious about the intruder. After this, Kostya decided not to hold back any longer and released a huge stream of mana around himself. It was so strong that many objects began to rise into the air. The young man uttered only one word, but he put into it the firm intention to drive the looter out of this restaurant and protect his mother. A moment after this, Misha was pulled out of the room with such incredible force that he was slammed into the wall of the house opposite. He was slammed against the surface so that the guy instantly lost consciousness. With such force, it wouldn't be surprising if most of his bones were broken. But Kostya clearly did not intend to stop there. Misha came to his senses and tried to find out from the guy who attacked him why he suddenly did this. However, our hero replied that complete people like him should remain silent. After that, Kostya again used his strength and squeezed the marauder at a distance. The young guy had already left the restaurant and even summoned his sword, intending to finish what he started. At that moment, the voice of a guardian was heard in his head, warning him that after this, he would become a killer. The hero still did not lower his weapon but froze in place and listened. The keeper continued to say that the marauder is not the kind of person for whom you can throw away all your former efforts. This speech brought our hero to his senses. He began to calm down little by little. The guy realized that if he went any further, he would definitely become a murderer, and he couldn't let all that time turn into dust. Therefore, Kostya hid his weapon, then approached the marauder and listened to him beg him for mercy. The guardian mentally reminded that if you leave this guy just like that, he will definitely die. Therefore, Kostya summoned a magic stone from the storage and slowly headed towards Misha. Then he leaned over to the guy, grabbed him by the hood, and lifted him off the ground. He ordered the marauder to open his mouth and take medicine if he wanted to live, which he obediently did. The medicine turned out to be so disgusting to him that Misha almost died for the second time from its taste and pain. In fact, it was a medicine that could restore absolutely everything in the body. Despite the taste and pain, it worked perfectly because Kostya had already used it himself before. After this, the marauder was tied up all over his body and taken straight to the nearest police station. At this time, our guy was preparing further and reasoned that going straight to the dungeon would be difficult. Now he needed to focus on regaining stamina or quietly earning money. After that, the guy stirred his soup, scooped some into a ladle, and brought it to his mouth to take a sample. The food tasted delicious, so they could set the table and call mom for breakfast. At this time, the police station had already managed to deal with the looter who was lying on their doorstep. The policewoman was angry about something early in the morning. The candy case brought more bodies instead of moving forward in the investigation. Her colleague approached the woman and tried to call her for lunch, but she was clearly not in the mood to eat. The guy noticed that if she doesn't eat, she won't be able to work normally, because in order to take good care of others, you first need to take care of yourself. The woman was infuriated that a colleague who was younger than her was lecturing her. Her phone rang, so the girl picked up the phone and introduced herself as the leader of the first detachment of the Department for Marauders, Tatiana. A message was received that Misha had been caught, so Tanya and her colleague went to the scene. They looked at the suspect's movement report, according to the information department. There were about 10 victims. Judging by the video they were sent, Misha definitely ate candy. After the news, Tatiana lit a cigarette to get rid of the accumulated stress. She was pleased that she was able to detain the culprit in 10 incidents, but Misha was not the only suspect in this case. These candies are actually an artificial enhancer. The woman said that she was not going to stop eating until she got to the bottom of the truth, because it was more important to find out where these candies were obtained. Immediately after this phrase, there was an awkward silence. In the silence, the junior colleague's stomach growled very loudly. To Tatiana's menacing look, the guy replied that he couldn't do anything about his hunger and wouldn't refuse snacks. So he looked around, hoping to find some place with food nearby. Nearby, there was a small restaurant of our hero and his mother. Therefore, the guy persuaded his senior colleague to go and have lunch there, at the same time gathering information and based on what the employees of the establishment saw and heard. The guy and the girl entered the restaurant, where Kostya met them with a smile on his face. The couple entered the establishment just as the hero was cleaning. They too, like all previous visitors, were surprised that there was only one dish on the menu. So they ordered 2 servings, sat down at the table, and continued talking about their own things. Tatiana was clearly unhappy with the current situation, and instead of investigating, they spent time sitting in a restaurant. Now they can talk to at least 10 victims, so if they do not reveal this body, they will be faced with defective things whose owners will lose control of themselves. That's what the press is saying, and a big corporation is sure to use it to make a fuss. And the guy only finished off Tatiana, saying that the boss would be very angry with her. It doesn't matter, because all they couldn't do was investigate, collect information regarding the incidents. All the victims had nothing in common at all. They even tested recently formed religions. They also did a lot of work and analyzed the composition of these candies. In addition, the guy noticed that the identification department would ignore all calls after hours and on weekends. Therefore, work is good and important, but you should not overdo it. Trying to cheer up his boss, the guy promised to follow her if she was kicked out. At this time, an equally important conversation took place in the kitchen. The keeper told Kostya such important information that it took the guy some time to perceive it. Because of the visitors, they had to communicate only mentally. It turned out that all this time the wolf was level 1. In order to move to the next level, it was necessary to successfully complete the quest to fulfill Tatiana's wish so that the boss would not punish her. Kostya immediately guessed that Tatiana was the same woman who was now sitting in their restaurant and waiting for her order. However, he did not understand at all how he could make sure that the boss did not punish her, and the wolf continued to talk about how the guardian's strength directly depends on a person's faith. It changes when something bad happens or a desire appears. But if this request is granted, then the divine power of the guardian grows. But Kostya correctly noted that using strength for this is the same as pouring into a bottomless pit. Therefore, the wolf decided to check with the guy whether he really understood what he just said. The guardian reminded the hero that he must complete this quest if he wants his mother to recover faster. Kostya couldn't even think of how he could solve the problem of people he was seeing for the first time in his life. He brought the order to his visitors, interrupting their conversation for a moment. The guests really liked the appearance of their food, but the guy still couldn't stop worrying about the task hanging on him. He tried to think of some reason to speak to his guests. That's why he invited them to bring some radish kimchi, which the restaurant owner had prepared in winter. Tatiana wanted to refuse, but her colleague said that beef soup must be eaten with radish kimchi. She usually doesn't like this kind of snack, but the rest of the food in this restaurant was really good, so the woman decided to try it anyway. She thought that she should eat them together. It would be right. This thought led her to the fact that looters always used candy along with artifacts. This was something new in the investigation, so Tatiana could not wait a minute. The woman got up from the table, left her food and ran away in an unknown direction, allowing her subordinate to eat her portion too. The guy was surprised by this strange behavior of his boss, but decided not to attach any importance and asked for a third serving of soup. He told our hero that as soon as his boss comes up with an idea, but she rushes to check it no matter what. This meant that the quest to fulfill a wish was completed. A few years ago, a young guy was sitting on the ground with his arms wrapped around his briefcase. Right in front, some girl threw another guy over her shoulder. She did this because they bullied weaker students. The beautiful girl told the bullies not to even try to say anything bad about the orphanage or about herself anymore, after which she straightened her clothes and was about to leave. At the last moment, the guy with the briefcase called her by the name of Dasha. He invited the girl to eat rice cakes with him, which he does quite well. These were memories from the childhood of our hero, who was surprised that his mother was still in contact with Dasha after so many years. To this woman, she replied that she was just a lonely child in this dangerous world. Thanks to mutual support, it was a little easier for both of them. Therefore, today the woman wanted to meet her young friend together. Our hero's mother was heading towards the exit and asked him to finally prepare dinner. Then the woman left the restaurant and slammed the door behind her, leaving the guy alone with the wolf. He knew immediately that she was heading to the hospital, but wanted to keep it a secret from him. The hero wanted to thank his childhood friend Dasha for helping his mother, so he invited Belyash to go for a walk to buy groceries. At this time in the city, a young girl with fiery hair greeted her old friend, whom she called Mother. She apologized for being late due to being kept at the Hunters Association, after which the woman and the girl took each other's arm and went to the hospital. At the doctor's appointment, he looked a little discouraged. It turned out that our hero's mother felt much better. Her condition has improved markedly. The tumor has greatly decreased. The doctor said this doesn't happen often, but it's definitely a good sign. The woman burst into tears from the feelings overwhelming her at that moment. She was very grateful that the illness was subsiding, and she had the opportunity to spend more time with her son. After a long time, the owner of the restaurant admitted to herself that she wanted to live again. At this time, our hero went to the nearest beach instead of the store. There, he built a kind of fishing rod, tying some strange fish to an ordinary rope. So he decided to take revenge on this fish because it tried to kill him, and now he made bait out of it. Kostya took the rope in his hand and began to spin it around himself with all his might. At some point, he caught a good position, applied additional force, and threw the bait into the water. At the same time, she flew so far that it was impossible to see the crash site from the shore. Kostya decided that this sea looks like this because of demonic monsters, which means there must be someone like the Kraken or something more interesting there. The guy complained that they now use ordinary freshwater fish for fish cutlets, but it is important for him that the taste reminds him of the sea. The wolf most likely didn't know, but the Kraken is very tasty, although its head and bones contain poison, so you can't eat a lot of them. While our hero was telling the keeper various ways to prepare Kraken meat, his makeshift fishing rod began to twitch. There was someone huge at the other end of the rope, but it was saturated with magical power, so it couldn't be easily broken. At that moment, a fight began between the monster and the fisherman to see which of them was stronger. Kostya held the rope with all his might, pressing his feet into the ground, trying to prevent the monster from falling off. Gradually, he began to pull the rope towards himself, so something gigantic appeared in the distance. The wolf was once again amazed that his master chose clearly not an ordinary person as his next guardian. And at this time, next to him, a battle was taking place not our life, but to the death. With one last strong jerk, Kostya pulled a real monster ashore, which was several hundred times larger than himself, which once again confirmed the fears of his guardian god. The broth for the soup begins to boil on the stove, and the roasted meats sizzle in the frying pan. It was Kostya who returned from fishing and began to prepare fish cutlets from the Kraken, which he had caught recently. At this time, Dasha and our hero's mother were returning from the hospital and stood in a traffic jam, which usually should not have happened in this place. The girl was very hungry, so she asked the hostess what would be served for lunch today. The woman looked at her adopted daughter and became thoughtful, remembering what they had. She remembered that Dasha was very fond of rice cakes, which her son Kostya often prepared. The lady offered to cook them, but the girl responded by suggesting that it would be better to go to another place and eat the stew. In the middle of their conversation, a bright red light suddenly appeared from afar and lit up the entire sky. Both women paid attention to it, and Dasha suggested that these could be waves from the fault. The owner of the restaurant immediately began to worry about the girl, because this meant that it was time for her to run away. In fact, Dasha was an official member of the Korean team that works with S-rank awakened ones. People called her the Crimson Witch, the Flame Witch, or the Destroyer. However, the girl herself thought for a minute and told her mother that she was not going to go anywhere. She noticed that the rift had not yet appeared, but it should happen soon, and the government should have already sent competent people to a rift of this level, and she herself had a day off today. Moreover, the girl was worried that her mother could not drive the car. She would have problems if she stayed here. But the hostess reminded her that she herself knew very well how easily a person could one day simply disappear, hinting at his son Kostya. Therefore, Dasha decided that she would stay in the car and stick together with the woman. It was at this moment that our hero's mother decided that she needed to inform the girl about the return of her son Kostya. At first, Dasha didn't even understand what she meant. This news seemed so incredible to her. The hostess said that the guy was sucked into the rift. He lost both his memory and sense of time. He looked 25 years old, as he was at the time he disappeared, which greatly surprised Daria. The woman admitted that this is why she looked so happy lately. She also added that she was so lucky only because she had the opportunity to help others and lived a good life. A son and beloved daughter returned 10 years later, as well as a short life that became much longer. The woman said that those who have known grief must become strong, and in such situations make every effort to prevent this from happening to other people. After which she looked meaningfully at Dasha and asked her not to worry too much. After all, the woman believed that the girl would have enough strength to save both her and everyone present here. So she will wait for her right here in the car until she returns. These words convinced the young girl, after which she got out of the car and headed towards the center of events to help. At this time, the people nearby were in a panic because the rift was about to open, and the awakened ones had not yet arrived. After that, they paid attention to a strange girl who walked right to the center of the danger and began to release fire from her palms. People watched as more and more flames appeared around the girl. Her red hair allowed them to guess that the Crimson Witch herself was standing in front of them. This calmed the townspeople a little, because now they were safe under the protection of a very strong awakened one. And Dasha had already arrived at the scene and realized that the rift would open much earlier than she expected. Therefore, the girl decided to prepare for this in advance, collecting some fire in reserve. She didn't know what to expect from the unknown rift, so she decided to use all her strength. Dasha summoned the power of fire, then divided it into several parts, leaving it hanging in the air next to her. After all the preparations were completed, just in time, the girl was able to fully prepare for the attack. She stood waiting, realizing that as soon as the rift opened, she would immediately begin to attack and would not allow a single monster to reach the people nearby. As soon as she thought about this, a crack immediately appeared on the fissure and the eye of the monster appeared. The people around also noticed that it was beginning to open up at once, so they rushed to the leak with even greater efficiency. At this time, a herd of gigantic nightmarish animals broke free. The Crimson Witch immediately recognized them as steel-horned goats, which were a very dangerous enemy even for her. Even though she was an S-class mage, the girl still shouldn't underestimate such opponents, because they had high resistance to magic and weak melee attacks. Dasha realized that in this situation, an awakened one specializing in close combat would be more useful. However, the girl immediately realized that there were no other awakened people nearby, and even if they made it in time, she still needed high-level fighters. Therefore, in order to protect the people close to her and the townspeople, the girl must stay and hold back the onslaught of monsters. She definitely could not remain idle because her mother was here. After this, Daria immediately decided to launch an attack, gathering a huge amount of her magical power in her hand. The girl directed all her power at the first of the monsters with one blow, causing an explosion of enormous power. The witch was furious that even such a huge explosion could not damage the monster. Due to its high resistance to various types of magic, it simply fluttered against the animal's shell without causing any harm to it. Therefore, the Crimson Witch decided to resort to another spell, which had a more powerful physical effect. A huge spear of magical fire, azure flame, fell on the monster's back, piercing right through his body. The goat immediately fell to the ground. A huge hole gaped in his body, which remained after the blow. Dasha took a few moments to catch her breath and come to her senses. At this time, the rest of the monsters, which had managed to break through the rift, were already rushing towards her. The girl counted 10 goats, while she herself could only use the azure flame 8 times. A moment later, she pushed off the ground with force and soared up. Then the girl came down hard on the second goat, driving her flames right into his head. Dasha was angry that reinforcements had not yet arrived, and these idiots from headquarters did not know at all what it meant to show up on time. The girl understood that the azure flame would not be enough for all the monsters, so she would have to resort to an even more powerful and dangerous means. It was a magic that covered her entire body in fire. She chose it because close combat was the weakness of these monsters, but the technique would not help her much here. The girl waited a couple of moments before the animals began to slow down, after which she used her new magic and went on the attack with lightning speed. A moment before the impact, Dasha gathered all her strength in one hand, concentrating it there. Then she lightly touched the animal's head with it, directing all her energy to that place. Huge streams of blue flames burst out of her hand, which were supposed to take the life of the monster. This lasted only a moment. Then the girl's skin became covered with spots, and the goat's body began to emit steam. Immediately after this, Dasha jumped over the monster, leaning her hand on it. The girl did the same thing again, concentrating all her strength in her leg. She dealt a crushing blow, throwing the huge monster into the air, after which Dasha fell to the ground. She had 8 more monsters to defeat, and they were already rushing towards her with all their speed, which did not bode well for the girl. She struggled to her feet after a short fight, her muscles already starting to feel tired. The girl understood that it was unlikely that she would be able to cope with all of them, but she was obliged to do everything in her power until reinforcements arrived. Suddenly, something caught her attention. This rift began to suck nearby objects into itself. At this moment, the girl could only think about the fact that her mother was still behind her. Several small stones rose into the air and glowed as if surrounded by magic, after which they fell directly on the head of each of the remaining goats, killing them instantly. Immediately after this, our hero appeared in the air, thinking that his old girlfriend was still as flaming as she was before. He slowly knelt down next to Dasha, who was lying unconscious on the ground. Kostya thought that the girl was in great pain due to the depletion of her magical power, so he tried to help and put his hand on the Crimson Witch's back. Although he could not help her restore her life force, he could replenish her magic power so that the life force would not be burned and would not affect her mana core. Now was not the time for memories, but the guy was glad to see his girlfriend again after so many years of separation. After some time, the Crimson Witch came to her senses and sat down straight on the cold ground. The girl looked at her hands and was surprised that she did not feel any pain at all. Although now it didn't matter at all, so she got up and rushed as fast as she could back to the car. The girl was incredibly happy to see that her mother was completely fine and safe. At this time, the woman was already standing on the street and talking with one of the policemen. She was also very glad that she was able to see her ward safe and sound. The woman immediately reached out to the girl to find out if she was okay and if she was hurt. The Crimson Witch decided to lie a little and said that everything was fine with her because reinforcements arrived on time. The girl said she was a little tired, but did not have any serious injuries, after which both women laughed joyfully because they got off so easily. After that, they decided to go out to dinner as they had planned before, so they needed to check out the store. However, Dasha had already changed her mind about eating the stew and invited her mother to go to her restaurant so that Kostya would prepare her favorite rice cakes for them. And at this time, our hero was just in the restaurant and was wondering when his mother and girlfriend were planning to return. Their first meeting after a long separation was very joyful. Dasha threw herself on the guy's neck, knocking him off his feet. Kostya sighed wearily after such an emotional meeting with his old friend. He recalled the first minutes of their reunion and realized that the girl had become much grumpier than she had been before. Our hero's mother said that she was very tired today, so she was going to rest. Finally, she asked to prepare Kostya a delicious meal when Dasha arrived, and also not to quarrel with her. The doors to the restaurant opened and late customers entered. It seemed to be Sergei and his young secretary the guy was very happy to meet. Kostya was trying new snacks at this time, not at all expecting to see anyone at such a time. At first, Sergei even thought that the guy was on a break, but he convinced him otherwise. Our hero said that he was simply preparing late-night snacks because there were no visitors, after which he took his dear guests to the table and told them about today's menu for the night. The young director noticed that the ingredients for such food were too difficult to obtain in their time, to which the hero said that the young people paid enough last time, and he himself thought that they needed to change the topic. The guy noticed that today the couple looked even more tired than last time. After these words, they generally fell into despondency, which greatly surprised the young cook. The guys literally put their heads in their hands and were very upset about something. It turned out that their company's negotiations went poorly, so they were forced to pay a huge amount of money. Then the chairman's son announced the return amount of 500 billion won, which greatly surprised our hero. Kostya could not believe the existence of such a huge amount. His whole body suddenly weakened and began to shake. Sergei said that they had a problem with the guild in which they invested. Recently, the renewable dungeon they bought suddenly disappeared without a trace. The renewable dungeon slowly releases monsters when the owners draw a magic circle, so they invested about 500 billion won into it. Kostya immediately realized that we were talking about exactly the dungeon that he had cleared, so he was truly horrified by what he had done. He said that this was an unaffordable amount for most people, so he asked if they were talking about a place that, until recently, was filled with all kinds of equipment. Sergei confirmed that all this belonged to their guild. There was so much stuff piled up there that the guy most likely noticed it when he passed by. The main problem was that they missed a great opportunity for the guild to become stronger because their awakened trained in that dungeon, which provided them with financial stability. They strived to become a strong guild, capable of clearing difficult dungeons and recruiting strong awakened ones, after which Kostya immediately asked what exactly happened during the negotiations. Because of such questions, Sergei suggested that Kostya could hide his identity, hiding behind a restaurant, and in fact be a journalist. But the guy convinced him. He admitted that his mother owns this place, and he just helps her because he loves to cook. After this, Sergei admitted that they were really lucky to meet here by chance, after which he asked the name of our hero. The guy introduced himself and said that he was 35 years old, which greatly surprised the guests, because he seemed much younger than them. After that, Sergei introduced himself and clarified that he will turn 32 this year. If the guy looks on the internet, he will find out that he is the head of the Manhwa Company Guild. The chairman's young son then looked at his secretary meaningfully. The girl immediately introduced herself, stated her age, and clarified that she was now the secretary of the head of the guild. Kostya thought that he already knew this, but he only said out loud that in fact he was unemployed, and he was still very far from being a reporter. After which he began slicing the meat, and the young people decided to make friends with such a good cook and invited him to have a snack with them. Our guy agreed with pleasure. At that moment, the keeper mentally called him, and a big white dog ran into the kitchen and stared at our hero. He told Kostya that a new quest had appeared to fulfill a wish. The number of karma points as a reward for completing a quest depends on the consequences that will be caused by successfully completing it. So this one promised as many as 5 million points. This meant that the two guests who needed help clearing the A-rank dungeon were not blinded by their own interests, so helping them meant helping a lot more people. Kostya thought that this would help raise the level of the Guardian, which would mean curing his mother's illness faster. At that time, he had just finished preparing the dish and placed it in front of his visitors. The guys were completely delighted with his appearance and clarified whether cooking was really just a hobby for our hero. The guy admitted that the restaurant has been in his family for 3 generations, so he is interested in this area. After which the guests tried the dish and were completely delighted with its taste. The whole trio was sitting nicely and having dinner when Kostya decided to find out if the guild could get their money back. He suggested that although this deal was significant because it could lead to great growth for the guild, they should return the money to her now that the rift has disappeared. Sergei replied that as compensation, they were given the opportunity to clear an A-rank dungeon. Kostya at first thought that this was an excellent option, but the thoughtful expression on the faces of his new comrades confused the guy. Diana clarified that although this was a good offer, it was different with an A-rank dungeon. The girl said that in their guild, there are almost no awakened ranks A and especially higher ones. To clear them, they need less, and at least 5 awakened ranks A. Therefore, for a guild like theirs, this is just an impossible dream. Sergei agreed with all of the above and added that if they had at least 1 awakened rank S, then it would be much easier for them to clear this dungeon. And Kostya thought that the matter was quite serious, after which a thought suddenly occurred to him. He called out to his new friends and offered to introduce them to someone. The guys were so shocked by what they saw that Sergei even dropped the spoon from his mouth. Right in front of them, some red-haired girl tried to strangle Kostya. During this entire altercation, she did not pay attention to those present. Then she noticed them and became embarrassed. The girl immediately let go of our hero's neck, smiled sweetly, and greeted the people. Once as a child, Kostya asked Dasha why she treated him differently from others, to which the girl simply smiled calmly and said that he was her friend. She continued by saying that someone like her is only friends with a certain type of person, and she added that our hero is one of those who could be her friend, which confused the guy. It was hard to believe because at the moment it was difficult to say. Dasha simply tied up her old friend and left him hanging upside down at the entrance to the restaurant. And at that time she was talking with Sergei and Diana, who offered her to help them clear the dungeon. The guys added that she could help them only if she had time for it, and in return, they would definitely not remain in debt. In fact, they could really use the help of such a powerful awakened one as the Crimson Witch. In response to this, the girl thought for a while, and then asked the guys if they knew how to drink alcohol. This unexpected continuation of the conversation caused surprise on the faces of the restaurant guests, but they agreed. After some time, Kostya was able to free himself from his bonds and return to the establishment. He was angry that the boys had messed up so much, but he was glad that he had convinced them to go somewhere else for the second round. The guy noticed that the quest was still not completed because the corresponding notification window had not appeared, but he thought that the girl would somehow sort out this matter. The Guardian replied that the level did not rise so quickly. Perhaps this was due to the fact that the guys were quite famous. After which Kostya offered to go to the mountains with him as a reward for the quest. He said he was going to get ingredients to cook a nutritious meal for him and his mother. He was going to dig up and prepare a plant that could only be found on the mountain. It was useful for those suffering from lung cancer. In addition, this mountain is considered a gray area, and Galgoro black bears have often been seen there. These are demonic monsters, the danger level of which reaches the first level. In addition, They have a rather nasty character, and they capture a large territory. And as soon as an intruder appears on it, they begin a battle with him to the death, even if the intruder is the same bear. Therefore, the only race that can get along with them is the golden bees, which can hardly be called demonic monsters. The keeper clearly didn't like being put on a leash, but Kostya noticed that it would be difficult to move around the city without it, so he asked the wolf to be patient a little. It was all for the sake of restoring stamina and finding ingredients for the food that the guy was going to cook, which pleased the keeper a little. The truth was, let it all be for the sake of finding the next guardian and trying to impose succession on another person. But the wolf still had little reason to justify going into someone else's house to save a dying man. This behavior only meant that the guardian actually loved people very much, after which Kostya thought that he was really taking advantage of the kindness of his guardian god. However, the guy noticed that he was not going to become his successor. He was not going to become someone as great at all. After this, a complete image of a guardian wolf immediately appeared in our hero's head. The guy has already forgotten what he looks like in his usual size, after which the hero decided that it would not be difficult for him to protect one single person. After some time, this strange company of a man and a white dog arrived on the mountain. The guys had been walking around looking for the plant they needed for a long time. Finally, they found the necessary ingredient and began to assemble it. Kostya was just telling his friend that the taste of this plant is not the main thing, because it helps well in restoring stamina. Before he could finish speaking, he immediately felt the presence of a huge black bear. The wolf also immediately felt the energy that emanated from this monster. Our hero put the plants behind his back, straightened up, and asked the keeper to hold the bear for a while. He would have done it himself, but he had something more important to accomplish than that. He took out a glass jar from his bag that he had prepared in advance. The honey from the bees he talked about at home is very tasty and restores a lot of stamina. After these words, the keeper agreed to detain the bear, which made our hero very happy. The guy asked to give him about 10 minutes to collect honey, after which he had to return and help the keeper. A huge bear, angry at the presence of strangers on its territory, advanced on the intruders. Kostya saw the monster approaching, so he once again asked his guardian friend to detain him for 10 minutes, after which he promised to return soon and set off at lightning speed in search of honey, so as not to waste a second of time. The smaller wolf took a deep breath from the fact that such a difficult task was assigned to him. At this time, the bear wasted no time. With its huge paws, it broke the thick trunks of perennial trees with one blow. The guardian looked at his opponent and could not believe that he had actually agreed to this adventure. At about the same moment, Kostya had already reached the place he needed, so he was now sitting on a tree and thinking about a plan of action. The guy was still a little worried, but he was sure that the keeper would be able to take care of himself, and he had more important tasks now. From his mana, the guy formed small golden balls that were supposed to help him in his business. Then, still high in the tree, Kostya sent them to the nearby territory. He knew that even by lightly touching the bees with magical power, they could be forced to return to the hive, and it would not be difficult for him to find them. As soon as he thought about it, one of the bees fell into his trap. Thanks to this, our hero immediately guessed where he should go next. Therefore, he pushed off with force from the tree branch and moved after the insect. It was not difficult for him to find a bee among all these forest plantations thanks to his magic. After that, all he could do was follow her closely. After all, he will need about 5,000 bees to receive honey at least once a month, and in addition to the excellent taste, it also perfectly restores stamina. Therefore, Kostya was very happy that he was able to stumble upon a large flower field, which was completely filled with bees. The guy froze briefly in admiration for such a beautiful view that revealed itself to him in this forest clearing. One of the giant bees landed on his hand, and the guy realized that everything was fine with their size. He began to look around in the hope of finding the place from where they were all flying out. Having walked a little to the side and moved the branch to the side, our hero found what he was looking for. Not far from the clearing, among the small trees, there was a huge beehive. Kostya was very surprised by such a huge size, although he was counting on it. He was especially pleased that, thanks to such a large size, there would be enough honey to come here not once a month, but once a week. Our hero began to knock on the walls of the bee house, hoping to snatch a piece of it for himself, and the insects stung him, defending their shelter. Our hero still managed to collect a sufficient amount of pure, beautiful honey. Kostya knew that this would be enough for him for the first time, so he was excited about his first test. The guy really thought that he should come here every week. Suddenly, something surprised him very much. He even exclaimed a curse. In fact, Kostya remembered that he had completely forgotten about his friend the Guardian, and at this time he was fighting an unequal battle with a huge magical bear. In the heat of the slaughter, the animals even got to the hero himself, which allowed Kostya to find himself on the battlefield. The guy immediately rushed to his white wolf, coming to his aid. The Guardian was clearly very exhausted, so Kostya immediately apologized for losing track of time. The guy put his hand on his friend's now soiled white fur. He realized that he had too high expectations for him, because he was far from in the best shape. The hero realized that the keeper came to his house out of his kindness. He did everything he could to help him, but the hero took it for granted. He even sent his wolf in his weak state to fight a real magical bear. The guy realized that everything happened through his fault, so he promised himself not to kill the monster. With lightning speed, he went to attack the monster and put all his strength into one single blow to the head. His intention was simply to euthanize the animal for about a week. We then see the restaurant owner come out onto the porch to meet someone. She saw her son returning all rumpled and dirty from a run on the mountain. The guy said that today they were very lucky. He was able to get fairly cheap honey and dug up some medicinal plants. But their conversation was interrupted by a company consisting of Sergei, Diana, and Dasha, who fell out of the restaurant with a hangover. They tearfully asked our hero to prepare hangover soup for them, and he was angry that they had the audacity to drink all night and then come here again. At first, my mother did not understand how to react to such a strange gathering, but then she cheered up, following the rest of the company. She had no idea that this was a completely unusual honey, so she suggested making them some refreshing honey water to help them relax. Our hero asked his mother not to stress too much. The woman said that everything was fine with her, but let him not neglect the connections he had already created. So she took the jar of honey from her son's hands and sent him to prepare breakfast. Meanwhile, the Guardian again turned into a small white dog and rested in our hero's bag. Several years ago, young Dasha told our hero that once, when she was adopted, she was immediately sent back, which surprised the guy. He asked if it was normal for her to tell him this. However, she added that at that age, she could not do anything about her anger, so 2 months later, those people sent her back to the orphanage. At the time, she didn't understand why she was returned, but as she grew older, she began to understand the reason. The girl was clearly upset about something, so she said that she needed to hide who she really was. After that, in all foster families, she began to behave as calmly and sweetly as possible. Dasha said that she tried to adhere to this pattern of behavior for the rest of her life. These memories came flooding back to our hero as he looked at his now eccentric, drunken girlfriend. Dasha jokingly said that honey water is so good that it seems to her that he added something else to it. After that, the whole company began to discuss what a wonderful cook Kostya had become. They also complimented our hero for looking very young for his age. They endlessly demanded hangover soup, breakfast, or honey water, which greatly irritated our hero. The guy warned that he wanted to fry some of the plant that he had dug up in the mountains. But he immediately warned that he wouldn't give much to the guests, because in fact he was doing it for his mother. Sergei was immediately surprised that even though the guy had honey and plants in stock, it was extremely difficult to get this food at this time. The guy asked his secretary whether Kostya would be uncomfortable if he also paid, although he had even prepared a gift. He prepared them as a thank you to his friends. One of his employees gave them to him this morning. Dasha was very inspired by such a surprise, so she asked to give her gift first. She joyfully extended both hands forward, expecting Sergei to put something in them. The guy turned around, reached into his bag, took out a box, and put it right in the girl's hands. Dasha immediately noticed that even the box looked very cool and asked if it could be opened. After permission, the girl carefully opened the lid. Inside, on a red velvet pillow, lay a watch, and she immediately put the gift on the table and said that it looked very expensive. She could not accept it. Sergei noticed that this was a gift, including for her future help. The watch was fireproof and should withstand even the strong flame of the Crimson Witch. Dasha listened carefully to every word the guy said. The girl was absolutely delighted with this gift. She really liked it. She even jokingly asked Sergei if she could marry him. At this time, footsteps were heard from the inside of the house, and someone entered the kitchen. It turned out to be the owner of the house, who came downstairs because of the noise. She saw that her son needed help, so she decided to go to him. In fact, the guy had everything under control. He brought out an absolutely amazing platter of appetizers. Absolutely every person present here spoke positively about the smell, color, and appearance of the food. Kostya said that this was done thanks to the amazing culinary skills of his school friend Dasha, meaning himself. After that, he put away the extra dishes in the sink, then joined his friends at the table and asked if it seemed to him that Dasha was going to marry Sergei. The guy was in such shock, but the girl happily began nodding her head in agreement. There was probably still alcohol in their heads. That's why the guys reacted like that. Sergei looked at Kostya and his mother and tried to convince them that this was just a joke. He explained that he just gave the girl a gift. He had prepared it for the owner of the restaurant, but now a strange atmosphere arose. The hero's mother was amazed that someone had prepared a surprise before her, but she was pleased. And at this time, Sergei pulled out from his bag another similar box with a watch on a pillow. The woman also admitted that the watch was very beautiful, but she doubted whether she should accept such a gift. However, the guy said that everything was fine, because her son saved their lives. Now they would go to the restaurant quite often. He suggested thinking of it as a bribe, as a joke, after which he began to talk about one special place, which was a dwarven workshop. The guy continued to talk about how the dwarves are one of the races that came to Earth after the Great Cataclysm. Sergei added that the Great Cataclysm was both a disaster and an opportunity for them too, since they could not find ways to return and decided to adapt to life on Earth because they had no other choice, so the government gave them a region to settle. The company recruited them to sell little things that they could make with their techniques. I didn't have time to finish when Dasha immediately understood what was going on. She said that they recently aired an advertisement, and a kitchen knife made from it looked very cool. The company is quite popular among housewives. Mother was surprised that her gift was bought in such a great place. Sergei awkwardly noted that since they were shopping in one place anyway, he put away the gifts there too. The guy began to talk about how it was always profitable, but he was afraid that he had upset his mother too much with his cold calculations. However, the woman still said that she would accept such a gift with gratitude. She admitted that if she refused, it would be rude to them, because they spent so much effort on getting this watch. Sergei was very pleased that such a wonderful woman thanked him sincerely. Before the guy could remember the joy, someone's strong hand grabbed him by the tie. Then the fist clenched forcefully and even began to cause some pain to Sergei. It was Kostya who put a threatening expression on his face and ordered his friend to be honest with him. Sergei was even frightened by such an unexpected reaction to this story, and Kostya, with a furious expression on his face, asked where the workshop that makes the famous kitchen knives was located. Sergei was confused. Even tears appeared in his eyes. He did not expect such a question and such a reaction at all. After that, the guys were separated. Sergei went to cry to his secretary, and Mom and Dasha scolded Kostya. This still did not stop the guys from going to that same dwarven workshop a little later. Kostya was in this area for the first time because he appeared during his absence. He expected it to be some kind of strange place, but it looks quite good. A fairly reliable building. He ordered the wolf to follow him, although he did not understand why he came here. The guy explained that it is ideal to be as passionate about completing the quest as possible. This was the only way to quickly cure our hero's mother, with which the keeper could not but agree. He wanted to answer something to our hero, but he was not allowed to do so. A red disc flew right in front of the wolf's nose, and a beast-like monster rushed after it. It was surprising that people did not run away in fear. On the contrary, they watched this performance with enthusiasm. The Guardian looked at all this as if he was not at all surprised. He admitted that the dwarves were quite comfortable on the ground, because such physical abilities could be used to perform acrobatic feats. However, then he looked at how some human child was sitting on the neck of an animal and added that they were a rather aggressive race, so their pride could be hurt. Kostya looked around and noticed one dwarf, whose fur color seemed familiar to him. Suddenly, a security alert sounded throughout the village, calling on all visitors to leave the place, but our hero clearly had no intention of following this decree. Kostya was almost caught by a guard, so he had to quickly go behind a tree and hide from his sight. The guy thought that sooner or later he would be discovered, so he needed to use the skill of stealth. However, as soon as he started using magic, someone suddenly attacked him from behind. The guy barely had time to jump away from the tree when a blow immediately fell there. If he had not managed to do this, then now his body would also be cut, but in several parts like this trunk. The monster held enormous power in his hands. Even the earth cracked under his onslaught. In fact, the monster sensed the use of magic, so it came to check its source. However, the guy replied that he knew him, even called him the Blue Fang tribe, and suggested that the monster's name was Tyler. The gray wolf was very surprised by this guy's strange reaction, and our hero noticed that the wolf was not so familiar with a large number of people, but still managed to forget him. The guy said with a smile that he just wanted to clarify whether it was really his friend, but it turned out to be him. After reuniting, this small company went to the dwarven home itself. While the wolf was calling to a certain old man, the Guardians noticed that this guy also had a quest. Kostya replied that he first wanted to meet his old acquaintance, and then watch the quest itself. After some time, a small old man came to the threshold of the house and immediately recognized our hero. The guy was very happy about such a meeting after a long separation. He immediately stood up from his seat and said the old man's real name. This grandfather was also very happy to meet him and called our Kostya hero Choi. The men walked towards each other to greet each other. Kostya heard that the old man had moved to live in another place, but he could not think that this was Earth. To which the old friend noted that, in fact, they did not intend to live here in the first place. He said that one day 5 years ago, the hero Kostya Choi was called up. At the first meeting, the old man immediately drew attention to the hero's strange sword, which had a blade that was too large for his body, and the handle was too thick. He said that although the material of the sword plays an important role, it is also important whether the blade is suitable for its owner. After the old man tried to pronounce the hero's name several times, he suggested simply calling him Hero Choi. In gratitude for saving his family and tribe, the dwarves decided to upgrade his sword to better suit him. His little granddaughter came out behind them and screamed that her grandfather was called a genius, which appeared once every 100 years, so he was definitely telling the truth. Kostya was amazed at such a bold reaction of this little girl, so he could not ignore the old man's advice. He happily handed his sword to the master and offered to play with the children while the work was going on. In fact, his games were quite strange. They brought children to tears. Because the guy was spinning these little dwarves on his shoulders with such force that their bodies simply could not stand it. He was asked to moderate his ardor a little, after which the guy calmed down a little and decided to talk with the older dwarves. The little girl replied that the dwarves did not stay in place until the ore was depleted, but they themselves were on the move and were almost at their destination. The world in which they lived, due to the invasion of demons, began to resemble ruins more. The magic of teleportation, which allows them to move between worlds, spends a large amount of bodily and magical power, and could have been trapped in the eternal universe if they had miscalculated. Therefore, they thought that they were very lucky to get into the kingdom of spirits until they were attacked by ostriches. The whole family was preparing for the inevitability of death until, at the last moment, a hero suddenly appeared and saved them. The granddaughter said that they all survived only thanks to him, but still she doesn't think they will stay here for long. After this, the guy admitted that he himself also did not belong to the kingdom of spirits. He is here only until they get rid of all the demons. In any case, the guardians of this place will not send him back until he wins and achieves his goal. The girl listened carefully to his story and offered her help. She said that she could return the hero back to the world from which he came, which greatly surprised him. I even thought that the guy didn't hear her, so she repeated her offer again. She said that she would need to ask the elders first, but since the hero helped them, she did not think that they would be against it. The hero didn't expect everything to happen so quickly, so he didn't know how to respond to this. He needed some time to think about her proposal and decide. Meanwhile, the granddaughter continued to talk about how they would have to try several times, but mistakes could not be avoided, and they would also need a huge amount of magical powers. The guy suggested that even with a huge amount of power, they would still need to complete the magic that allowed them to travel between dimensions. In addition, even if the probability of making a mistake is almost zero, the risk of getting lost in space still remains. The girl was amazed that the guy knew a lot about their own magic. Therefore, Kostya looked at her with gratitude and decided to refuse their offer, because he believed that he would still be able to return to his homeworld. At that moment, images of his mother and Dasha came into our hero's head. However, the last time he saw them was so long ago that they were blurry, and the guy could not remember anything clearly. At this moment, one of the adults from the tribe approaches them and warns them that the sword is almost ready. This made our hero very happy, so he suggested coming closer and waiting there. He once again expressed his gratitude to this little girl and asked her not to be upset. After some more time, Kostya was surprised that the dwarf family still decided to come to another dimension. The news was told to him by the huge lion, who himself heard it from someone else. Our hero was very happy for his friends, but at the same time he was surprised why they decided to leave so suddenly. Perhaps in that world there were many magical stones that the courtyards really needed. Most of the stones in this world are found inside monsters, and dwarves are not very good at fighting, so digging would be ideal for them. But in the spirit realm, this type of stone is difficult to find. After this conversation, our hero climbed onto the back of his friend the lion. He decided that he definitely needed to say goodbye to his old acquaintances. Lev warned that Maxim was there, helping the tribe to travel their magic through the dimension. Our hero was not very friendly with this Maxim, but promised not to do anything. After which this strange couple immediately went to the village. The huge lion covered long distances in just one jump, so the hero had to hold tightly to his mane. And at this time in the village, the elder was already running towards our Kostya. Both of them were very glad to see each other after quite a long separation. Kostya said that he hoped that the tribe would get used to this place and settle here, but it seems too difficult for them here. He can help them with many things, but he was powerless against the ecosystem. The guy noticed that the old man had tears in the corners of his eyes, ready to flow. He admitted that the hero already helped them a lot. He saved them from death many times. If not for him, they themselves would have become spirits, and would not have tried to travel through dimensions. After these words, another dwarf came out of the crowd and brought out something in his hands. The old man asked to accept this as a small parting gift. This bow was made by one of the best blacksmiths in the history of their tribe. At one time, he was the seventh leader who became famous for his artificial skill. This bow does not need arrows. You can simply pour in magical power, and the arrow will appear on its own. Kostya was amazed and asked if they were sure that they wanted to give him something valuable. However, in response, the elder bowed to him and said that thanks to his courage, they themselves wanted to become better. This is their way of repaying him. He offered it himself because the bow is the treasure of their tribe. However, before this, they all consulted together, so this is a gift from the entire tribe. Only after this, Kostya noticed that now not only the old man, but also absolutely all the inhabitants of this settlement were bowing to him. The magic portal had already been opened, so the old man finally only added that he prayed that in the future, there would be no difficulties on the hero's path. Remembering all this, our hero could barely hold back his tears from the surging emotions. But at this time, the whole company sat in the human world and enjoyed their reunion at the game. The old man admitted that he did not hope that he would be able to see the hero again, so he was really happy. Then he added that he heard that Kostya wanted to ask him for a favor. After that, our hero remembered why he came here in the first place. He handed the elder a note with a drawing and said that he was going to give it to a hunter he knew, so he just needed the device to work, without having to put in a lot of effort. The old man thought for a long time, so the hero even thought that this was too difficult a task. Grandfather explained that the density of magical power on the ground is too weak, so now they cannot activate the brazier using magical power, and the mana cores were damaged in the last move. And they were prepared for the fact that something would go wrong during the spatial transition, so they landed on the ground without any problems. He apologized for the fact that the hero had put so much effort into finding them, but the tribe was defeated. To which the hero remarked with a smile that they had absolutely no need to apologize to him. The elder was surprised by the guy's easy reaction to his words. However, the hero asked his elder friend to come a little closer to him, after which he pointed his hand in his direction and began to exude some kind of magic from it. He used this power to restore his friend. The old man immediately felt that something had happened to his mana core. Kostya explained that he tried to invest magical and life force, although today is the same as before, but it should have been much better. After which he gave his friend a whole glass of golden bee honey, which could help him. The guy admitted that he was lucky and was able to get some, so now he is happy to give some of it to his friend. Kostya said that he would try to make sure that the entire tribe could restore their mana core, but in the middle of the conversation, he noticed that the dwarf began to cry. The guy immediately rushed to find out what happened suddenly that the old man reacted like that. He said that with such help, he would only need 1 day to complete the task. He was very grateful for the help. He looked at the drawing on the sheet and said that he would try to complete everything on time. After which our hero returned home, using his unimaginable power, doing it in the blink of an eye. He immediately received a message from Sergei that the date had finally been determined when they could go on a raid in the dungeon. Kostya continued to talk to him on the phone, and at this time he went inside the restaurant. Sergei said that in 3 days the dungeon itself will appear, and their raid will take place in 7 days. After that, our guy asked if his friend Dasha had told him about this. He was not satisfied with the answer, so he invited Sergei back to his restaurant to discuss the problem. But he could hear absolutely nothing. He only burst into tears while lying on the table. It turned out that Dasha agreed while she was drunk, and then sobered up and simply took back her words. After the party, the girl heard Sergei's proposal again and said that she didn't remember anything. And then she added that she doesn't work in groups at all. Kostya calmed his friend down and said that he should have concluded a written contract with the girl or recorded the conversation while they were drinking. After this, our hero came up with a great idea, so he invited Sergei to have a drink during the day. He added that Dasha herself loves to drink throughout the day. According to their plan, Kostya was supposed to try to negotiate with her, and Sergei was to take advantage of this. After that, our hero immediately dialed his friend's number to ask her to come to the restaurant. The girl did not pick up the phone for quite a long time, but eventually did so. She immediately said that she had warned Sergei yesterday that she would not do anything for him. However, Kostya noticed that he had a different opinion about his friend, who had never broken a promise to someone before. But he himself called for a completely different reason. He just wanted to offer me a drink. After which they agreed on a time to meet and hung up. The first phase was completed successfully. After the end of the conversation, Kostya said that he was able to drag Dasha into the restaurant, so the second stage of the plan was up to Sergei. The young director was very grateful to his friend for what he did for him. After which I left him alone in the hall and went to the kitchen to prepare snacks. At this time, a car stopped outside with a huge squeal of tires. The young businessman shouted to his friend the cook that the girl had arrived. Dasha entered the restaurant and hoped that all preparations for drinking had already been completed. She was very surprised to see Sergei here, because no one warned her about this. The girl was angry that they called her for this, but Kostya said that Sergei was just passing by and decided to come in. He wanted to leave when he heard that Dasha would come here soon, but she caught him on the way out, so he suggested that they both stay. Sergei was grateful for this offer, but asked whether everything would be fine. I was worried about Dasha's reaction, but the girl said that nothing bad would happen. He could stay. After which Sergei sat down at the table and began to discuss the snacks that their mutual friend had recently prepared. However, Daria still noted that she would not change her decision even if they all drank together, because she had never participated in dungeon raids. She is already responsible for the faults, and it is more comfortable for her to work alone, especially since a group of at least 5 people is legally allowed to clear the dungeon. The girl noticed that she and her team tried to work together, but most were focused on their opponents more than she was. They are strong enough alone, so teamwork does not go well. Sergei was jealous that they were strong alone, but the girl did not share his feelings. In fact, she didn't want the whole world to know that the more she used her powers, the more crazy she became. If others found out, they would likely even publish an article saying that the Flame Witch had gone crazy. Before this, she had silenced people with money, but she couldn't imagine how to silence the awakened ones of this wealthy Xinhua guild and their workers. While they were all sitting at the table and eating, the girl muttered something under her breath, after which Kostya noticed that the girl easily breaks promises and refuses without even explaining the reason. He said that Sergei must please his father and not get caught by the yellow press. Everything is so bad that he is forced to ask for help from an unemployed guy from a street restaurant, so he asked to take all this into account. He added that even though what Kostya said was true, Dasha should not feel obligated. The girl tried to appear again, but the guy didn't let her do it. Sergei repeated his phrase, this time emphasizing the word obliged. Dasha immediately realized that she was simply being manipulated, so she was embarrassed. She noted that it was useless to try to put such pressure on someone who had no parents or other family members to impress. To which Kostya noted that in fact Dasha has him and his mother, so she has no right to say that. The girl replied that for a guy who had been missing for 10 years, he had no conscience at all, but she still thought about something. After some time, Dasha said that she would still help Sergei with the dungeon if he stopped behaving like that. To which Kostya noticed that the girl had been constantly changing her mood lately. However, she didn't answer anything. She just continued drinking and praised the taste of the alcohol. Our hero thought that sometimes he doesn't understand his girlfriend at all. However, I noticed a system notification that the quest to conclude a contract for a raid in a dungeon with Dasha was completed. He received 5 million karma for this. Literally a moment later, Dasha and Sergei were already drunk and went on a revelry. While the guys were resting and preparing for future work, Kostya went to the kitchen and decided to clean up a little. The guy was focused on this matter when he noticed that someone was about to enter his restaurant. And literally a moment later the door opened, an elder and a huge gray wolf walked inside. After that, the trio went to a park nearby to see something. Both dwarves were very surprised that in the middle of the city there was a tree of peace growing on the ground. Meanwhile, it had already grown quite tall, even sprouted several branches and illuminated everything around with its magnificent appearance. Kostya said that this is the same tree. The world gave him his seed before he returned. It grows quite well. The elder even noted that the spirit that is responsible for it must live here. Kostya admitted that he couldn't even grow a cactus himself, so he simply made a contract with a spirit nearby, then clapped his hands, urging him to come out. Immediately after this, a small spirit flew out of the crown of a small tree towards the friends. He was very cute. Kostya admitted that he called him Cricket because he was very similar to him. To which the elder noticed that this little spirit did not at all look like a cricket. These words struck our hero to the very heart. However, the grandfather admitted that the spirit had done an excellent job looking after the place, after which the cricket flew up to the wolf and handed him a golden leaf. It was real moongrass, which he never ate because it is very difficult to find. Kostya told him to try it, although the wolf will not be able to regain its true magical power, but it should restore a decent part of it. The huge monster looked at this small leaf, completely not believing in its miraculous powers. However, he still decided to trust his old friend and hastily tossed it into his mouth. As soon as he swallowed it, his mana core immediately felt a surge of power. The wolf noticed that this method worked. His energy immediately increased. Kostya noted that this is a temporary effect, but moongrass grows here, so the wolf can sometimes come here and take it. He also asked his old friend the elder if he could enter into a contract with spirits on Earth. But without waiting for an answer, Kostya stepped a little to the side, bent down and began digging in the ground. After which he pulled the small mole spirit to the surface, offering to try it on him first. He said that if something happened, he would help with his magical power. After that, both of them, the elder and our hero, extended their hands to the spirit. They laid down their magical powers in an attempt to form a contract. This method worked because the little mole immediately greeted his owner and asked for a name. Kostya noticed that as soon as the old man gave him a name, the mole would become his spirit. Grandfather was very embarrassed and decided to name his new mole Gray. Immediately after this, a contract between the old man and the spirit was concluded. That little mole turned into a shiny little ball and disappeared into thin air until he was called. The old man noticed that the hero constantly helps him even in this world. He said that the thing behind the wolf's back was what the guy asked for. Kostya took the burden off his old friend's shoulders and opened the box. He was amazed by the appearance and magical power of this beautiful bow. He was worried that the hero didn't like his gift, but the guy noticed that it even exceeded his expectations. After which our hero decided to try it out first. The guy supported the weapon in his hands and noticed that it was beautiful, like any work of this master. The old man and the wolf looked at their friend and one thought occurred to them. They realized that no matter how much time had passed, this guy remained the same hero they had once met. Looking at this guy, they realized that he most likely chose the right path. He allowed them to live peacefully, so all they can do is help him without question. At this point, the meeting was over. The guy said goodbye until next time. Immediately after this, our hero's phone rang. He thought it was Sergey. However, as soon as he picked up the phone, Kostya almost went deaf from the scream that came from the speaker. He was ready to kill his interlocutor for such a domestic attack, but he restrained himself. Sergey joyfully called him to report that everything worked out for them. He had just reported to his father, and since this is good news, he decided that Kostya should be the first to know about it. He also added that tomorrow he would have to meet his father. The hero was very glad that he could help his friend. His sense of guilt only grew with each new word from Sergey that this was entirely his fault. However, this was not all the news, because the young chairman once mentioned the hero in a conversation with his father. Therefore, he said that he wanted to meet with him. So on the day of the dungeon raid, the whole team would have a snack at their restaurant. This news was so big that Kostya was delighted and at the same time terrified of the upcoming cooking. A few days later, there was a raid. Kostya carried boxes of food on the road. He looked around and thought that too many people had gathered here. Even his mother was tired under the influx of such a huge number of people, so the hero sent her to rest until lunch. He told the woman he could do it alone, but in reality, the guy was terrified of how much work he had to do. Suddenly, a man approached him, wearing a very expensive shining watch on his wrist. He looked very good for his age. His appearance was clearly well looked after. The man introduced himself as Sergey's father and extended his hand to our hero for acquaintance. Kostya was surprised that usually people of higher status do not look at people of lower class. Sergey's father clearly noticed the confusion on our hero's face. When he turned to Kostya, he immediately thought that something terrible would happen. For example, he could order to stop hanging around his son because they live in different rooms. The guy had a low status. In the crowd, he had to humiliate him in his refined aristocratic manner, after which he and his mother would be forced to flee into exile, because that's what they do in the TV series. This happened only in his imagination, but Kostya had already begun to mentally apologize to his mother. He decided that if he apologized first, the man would be more lenient because he would take him by surprise. Therefore, the young guy immediately bowed to the man, hitting his head hard on the table, and instead of all this nonsense, he offered him to work for the company. Sergey's father was amazed at such a strange reaction of our hero, and the guy, who was bleeding from his head, did not expect such a generous offer at all. After some time, when the blood was stopped and ice was applied to the head, both men sat down on a bench nearby and began to talk. First of all, Kostya thanked his friend's father for his experiences and once again apologized for what happened. The man repeated that he would like to work with the young man, but noticed that he was going to refuse. Kostya really noticed that now he wants to devote himself entirely to his family, so he's not sure whether he can cope with his work. To which the man noted that they themselves like to read people by their facial expressions. Or rather, it comes to many people with age and life experience. So he looked carefully at the guy again and said that he makes people put their hopes on him. Kostya was very grateful for this assessment and was even a little embarrassed. They would have continued talking about their business if a whole crowd of people had not suddenly run up to the president. They informed him that a raid on the dungeon would begin soon. Reporters were already waiting for him. The president turned to Kostya and said that he had already understood from the conversation that he had rejected his offer. However, it still remains in force, so I asked our hero to think again, after which he said goodbye and left. After that, Kostya decided that he should go check on the guys just in time. Dasha looked so bad that Kostya even clarified what was happening to her, and the girl replied that she was so nervous that she might even vomit. The hero was surprised that his girlfriend could be nervous, for which he received punishment. The girl noticed that this was indeed her first experience of working in a team. That Kostya noticed that if she refused you again, then Sergei would burst into tears. Dasha admitted to her friend that the more she used fire, the more she lost her sanity, so she was worried that this would cause bad rumors about the Crimson Witch's reputation. Kostya tried to cheer her up and said that she had no reputation anyway. Hearing the words that no one cared about her, the girl flew into a real rage. Meanwhile, Sergei, who led the raid, gave interviews to reporters. He turned his attention to his friend Kostya, who came up to him to say goodbye before leaving. The young entrepreneur immediately noticed that something had happened to his friend's head. In order not to embarrass anyone present, our heroes walked away and stood nearby behind a tree. After that, Kostya carefully examined his friend and noticed that he had been training a lot. The guy was delighted that someone noticed his external changes. He admitted that he was a little nervous and wanted everything to work out, so he did a little preparation in advance. Kostya noted that Sergei always tries his best. This impresses him. Sergei's inner mood noticeably improved from just these encouraging words. In fact, Kostya noticed that his friend had raised the whole class, but something still worried him. In fact, there was a suspiciously frightening aura emanating from their dungeon. Kostya hoped that this was all just his paranoia. By that time, all preparations for the raid had already been completed. Sergei and his team set off, finally asking the cook to prepare food for them before returning. Kostya waved goodbye to his friend, hoping that everything would go well for him. However, after some time and a huge mountain of prepared food, the guy only thought that if his friend returned alive and unharmed, he would kill him himself. Just then his mother finished counting and packing the boxes. The awakened should have already returned, so the guy had to hurry up and clean everything up. Suddenly, a strange feeling of anxiety and danger pierced the entire body of our hero. He was not the only one who felt this, because even the birds decided to leave these places. Kostya looked at the flying flocks and agreed that he was experiencing a frightening feeling. At this moment, even the guardian began heart-rendingly calling for our hero. He was literally screaming that something was clearly wrong with the dungeon. But literally 8 minutes ago, Dasha stood in it, breathing heavily after the fight. The girl had just single-handedly defeated a whole crowd of giant scorpions. She was so strong that everyone else in the raid didn't even have to make any effort. The Crimson Witch at that moment was worried that people were looking at her like she was crazy. After which, Diana noticed that they entered the dungeon only 6 minutes ago. Sergei was also amazed at how strong his new friend turned out to be. After that, the guys went as close as possible to the Crimson Witch to help her if she needed anything. The girl noticed that there were no more monsters nearby, so Sergei allowed her to go outside with the others. He promised that he and Diana would catch up with the remaining team members when they were sure that the cleanup squad had begun work. The Crimson Witch was satisfied with this answer, so she and several other people headed out. All the guys made a promise to each other that they would see each other outside. However, as soon as they left the dungeon, something strange immediately began to happen to him. It seemed as if the sky was covered with cracks and split into several parts. Our hero Kostya immediately felt that something was wrong. He noticed a strange energy. The technical team also detected an anomaly. A fissure appeared right in the dungeon, and in terms of indicators, it was at the level of a catastrophe. Kostya ran to the specialist and tried to find out whether his friends had time to leave the danger zone. The man immediately replied that most of the hunters had left the dungeon, but Sergei, Diana, and the cleanup group were still inside. After that, Kostya immediately threw off his extra apron and gloves and rushed to his friend's aid. At this time, a young businessman, his secretary, and a cleanup team found themselves inside the rift. They all also felt that something was wrong. Not far from them, in front of the cave, they noticed a fissure of frightening force. Looking at him, the guys could immediately tell that they couldn't do it alone. And the cleanup group, which was even weaker, was truly horrified by what was happening. Everyone present was very scared because they did not know what awaited them ahead. However, something had to be done, so Sergei decided to take command. He decided to calm his guys down and ordered them all to prepare for defense. He said that as soon as he and the secretary checked everything, then, if possible, everyone would head towards the exit. He also convinced people that everyone outside should already know about the rift, so once things calmed down, they could assess the situation. He asked everyone present to remain calm, and on behalf of the entire company, declared that he would not let anyone die here. Immediately after this, Sergei and Diana went to reconnaissance of the situation. Sergei admitted that no matter how much he ignored the fact of the strength of this fault, there definitely should have been a bladed panther there. The guy seemed absolutely right, because a huge white predatory cat came out to meet them. The young head immediately realized that this was a catastrophe on the level of the first great cataclysm. The last time in such an incident, there were more than 6,000 victims. 2 entire islands were completely turned into ruins. The chance that the 2 of them could defeat her was close to 0, but the guy didn't expect to win anyway. He only believed and hoped that all his painful training had not gone in vain. They only needed to hold out until reinforcements arrived and the rest of the people were evacuated. At this time, our hero Kostya had just made his way into the rift unnoticed. Finding himself in the dungeon, he immediately found himself on the battlefield. At that moment, Diana stepped forward to hold back the beast's attack, asking the head to cover her from the back. Kostya thought that if Dasha had been here, they would not have been able to take control of the situation. However, if he intervenes, he will then deal with the consequences. Therefore, he urgently needed to figure out how to help his friends. And at this time, literally with one blow, Diana went flying and crashed into a rock. The blow was so strong that the girl clearly suffered serious injuries. Sergei was horrified that even his strong friend was so easily injured. Now he was the only one who needed to protect them both. Seeing such reckless actions of his new friend, Kostya could no longer sit on the sidelines. He took the gift from the elder and threw it with all his strength right in the middle between the monster and Sergei. This caused the young director to jump to the side and lose his balance for a while, but then a voice rang out in his head, ordering him to take the bow in his hands. The guy absolutely did not understand where it was coming from, what kind of bow he was talking about, until he saw a weapon stuck in the ground in front of him. Only after this did the young man notice that the voice was coming from this very bow. He did not know that his friend Kostya was speaking to him through him, who was ordering him to take up arms. Sergei had no choice but to obey this mysterious decree. Then the voice ordered the guy to collect all his mana in one place. Concentrate it in your hand and turn it into the image of an arrow. Sergei himself did not understand how this happened, but as soon as he thought about the arrow, his energy also turned into it. The guy didn't hesitate for a long time, launching his outfit straight at the beast. The arrow flew quickly, hitting the huge panther right in the throat. It had such a strong impact that Sergei immediately lost his balance and fell to the ground. At this time outside, the father of the young director was shouting that he did not care about the condition of the dungeon and any expenses. He only asked that his son be saved. Things weren't so bad at the rift. The panther was hit with just one blow. Sergei himself was shocked that he managed to defeat such a strong monster so easily. The guy lay on the ground and looked at the defeated enemy. At this time, the monster emitted its last death rattles, after which it completely stopped moving. The young master thought with joy that it was all over now. After that, he immediately remembered that he was not here alone. He rushed to his secretary Diana to check her condition. The head asked the girl if everything was okay with her, if her bones were intact, to which she replied that she was hurt, but overall she was feeling well. She actually looked much better than before. The girl, like Sergei himself, was amazed at how easily they dealt with this powerful monster, after which they could rejoice in their victory without any sense of danger. The young leader was glad that she had defeated the panther, although not without the help of some external circumstances. Although he spoke joyfully, Diana still realized that something was wrong. She turned out to be right, because literally a moment later, without even having time to finish speaking, the guy began to fall back. He had lost too much of the strength he had put into that last blow. Fortunately, the secretary managed to catch her boss before he fell, after which the guy came to his senses a little. He was even able to sit up on his own. Diana noticed that the head of the company would definitely be pleased. She would tell him about what happened. A couple of moments after this, a portal began to appear next to our heroes. A gate opened, allowing everyone locked inside the dungeon to leave. A whole crowd of doctors was already standing outside, and Sergei's father was worried about the condition of his son. He remembered the feeling he felt when he was told that there was a rift on the scale of a catastrophe inside, and no one could contact the people who were stuck in it. At one point, the head of the corporation was even told that the chances of his son returning were 0. However, now the danger had passed. All the hunters were returning home. Sergei and Diana had already left the dungeon and noticed the director nearby. The man immediately rushed to hug his son, which embarrassed him a little. First, he checked to see if everything was okay with his boy, if he was safe. Immediately after this, Sergei reported that he was able to deal with the panther that came out of the rift. Her corpse should have been enough to cover the losses of the guild, but everyone present was more amazed by the fact that the guy dealt with her himself. Diana only confirmed his words, saying that by that time she could no longer fight. The chairman's father noticed that his son had done a good job, but the reason for his excitement was not the panther. In fact, the total would be enough for him to return his son safe and sound. Kostya and Dasha stood nearby and watched the reunion of relatives. A few days later, Sergei joyfully entered our hero's restaurant and presented him with great news. However, Kostya was not so happy about this. He was rather amazed. The young president admitted that he decided to build an institute for the awakened on this site. He added that it was quite difficult to get permission to build outside of a designated residential area. But after his victory over the panther, he was gladly given permission. He also planned to change the location of the guild office, but promised not to touch the alley with his friend's restaurant. But the problem was that Kostya hated loud noises. He hoped to live in this place like a lazy retired billionaire. And Sergei continued to say that he would like his friend to be in charge of food for the builders. However, the guy didn't even have time to agree when a bun flew into his face. Kostya ordered his friend to turn up and get out of this territory, to which Dasha noticed that she and her mother had already agreed to this proposal. The girl said that the hero's mother really liked this idea. The lunch would last only 30 minutes. They would pay for the ingredients, and since there would be a lot of work, they would provide a good assistant. After that, Kostya had no choice but to agree with the proposal of his friend Sergei, who had already eaten the bun. At this time, the Guardian was enjoying the message that they had successfully completed 2 whole quests and received additional points. For them, a whopping 65 million karma points were awarded, which allowed him to immediately rise to the 3rd level, which meant that now he could finally sign the student contract that he had been waiting for so long. It was late in the evening when someone shouted loudly throughout the entire restaurant and asked to take care of him. At this sound, sleepy Kostya came out to check what was happening there. He was not yet fully awake. His mouth was with the remains of saliva, his eyes were crusty. At the entrance to the restaurant, he saw a young girl with a backpack on her shoulders who was talking with his mother. It turned out that this was Miss Olga, who would be helping them with the restaurant for some time. A couple of hours later, we see the main character sitting at the table and looking very gloomy. The keeper pesters the guy with questions about whether he was kicked out of the kitchen, to which the guy snaps and orders him to close his mouth. He remembers his last conversation with Sergei, when he said that they have a very small premises, they should expand, so he should buy the neighboring building. After which he immediately fulfilled his promise, so Kostya was shocked by such a huge number of tables for visitors. The guy was a little angry that everything was decided for him. He even thought that all rich people were like that. The hero did not fall for this. He knew that the Guardian had left last night and returned only at dawn. The wolf was annoyed that, due to Kostya's bad mood, he was now taking it out on him. He actually admitted to going to Tyler, the dwarf, at home. He said that when Kostya helped Seryozha, the keeper increased his level, and now he could sign a student contract. The wolf explained that this is something like how if Tyler gets karma points, then he gets them too, and his level increase has a good effect on Tyler himself. This is something like a connection in a team, to put it in more understandable terms. The Guardian also said that if Kostya can regularly complete quests for him, then he will be able to completely cure his mother of her illness as soon as she reaches level 5. The guy was very happy with this news because it meant that he could help his mother faster. While they were talking to each other, not noticing anything around, the door to the restaurant opened and someone entered it. Kostya had to pretend that he was actually just playing with his dog all this time. In fact, Diana and another man came to the guy because they wanted to turn this premises into a restaurant. He understood that everything depended on the business for which they bought the land, but still clarified what they needed from him. Diana explained that after surveying the entire area, they discovered a vegetable garden in the backyard of this restaurant. Perhaps it should be destroyed. Kostya remembered that he had recently argued with Sergei about this. He didn't care about the safety of this place, but he was worried about the tree of the world. So he said that they grow vegetables there for the restaurant, so he would like to keep the garden. After which Diana proposed to assign this entire territory to the status of an eco-park. After which the secretary said that as soon as they completed the design and expansion, they would begin construction. But Kostya was confused by the man who was sitting next to them. It was Daniel, the foreman who would oversee the construction. The girl brought him with her to introduce him personally. The guy was very cheerful. Despite his suffering appearance, he shook hands with Kostya. The hero was surprised that such a young guy was already the head of a construction team, which embarrassed Daniel. Diana sighed and said that the guy used to work in their guild, but he did not have any unique ability, so he was reassigned to construction. Although he does not have a unique ability, he is still awakened, so he is able to work much more efficiently than ordinary people. Immediately after this, Kostya learned that he had a quest to fulfill a wish to return Daniel back to the guild. At the same time, the guy literally felt with his back how the Guardian was looking at him intently from behind. Our hero learned that the builder had the class of the largest warrior, which was very rare, especially since he had unusual abilities. A larger body meant that the more a person ate, the more fat he accumulated, his bone structure becoming extremely dense. Inflammation meant that stored fat and bone density would be used. And if he had features related to strength, speed, mana, then his mana, defense, and recovery would increase. And the last compression power was the most useful feature. The guy only needed to reach the 8th level. Our hero understood that this guy had the potential to become really strong. And at that moment in the kitchen, Olga and Kostya's mother were having fun and cooking together. Diana continued to talk about how they needed to start with demolition. And since the equipment would be moving, the restaurant's residents might hear loud noises coming from that direction. Kostya agreed, offered to feed all the workers and at the same time get to know them. He said that such work was not a burden to him, and he would only be happy to help the guys. Everyone left after a while. Night fell, but someone still did not sleep. Small gray mice with red eyes ran through the trash cans, squealing pitifully. One of them looked quite unusual because she had some kind of device attached to her body. This is a mouse, and it behaved a little differently. It even stood on its hind legs and sniffed something. As if sensing danger, the animal immediately began to run. It rushed through the middle of this deserted street as if its life depended on it. But in fact, the mouse had well-developed intuition, because all this time a strange green cat was watching it. However, the animal did not manage to escape, because the predator overtook its prey in one jump. The first thing he did was press the button on the device on the back of the mouse with his strange green paw and claws, after which there was a fairly strong explosion that caused pain to the animal. Licking its wounds, the cat reasoned out loud in a human voice that it was a self-destruction device. He walked literally a few meters, after which he stopped, sat on his hind legs, and began to glow. Suddenly, the same green wings began to appear on the cat's back. A few moments later, there was no trace of the animal left. Instead, a bird soared into the sky. After some time, construction was in full swing. Cranes and building materials were delivered. Workers scurried back and forth, laying out their plans and discussing construction. At this time, life in our hero's restaurant changed dramatically. Every day it was visited by quite a lot of workers who really liked the food in this small establishment. The guy was only too happy to feed all these hard workers, because he really liked to cook. But that didn't change the fact that he still needed to discover Daniel's secret ability and complete the quest. Therefore, between work, our hero ran and looked after his ward. This time, just as he wanted to come up and talk to the guy, something stopped him. In fact, it was one of the brigade leaders who ran up to Daniel and asked him about his well-being. It turned out that just recently Daniel was injured very seriously, which could even lead to a fracture, but there was not a scratch on him. Although the guy was not sure that Daniel was seriously injured, he dissuaded him and calmed him down. After that, Kostya's short break ended, and he went back to the restaurant to cook. And there Olga was already serving the workers today's dish, pork and sweet and sour sauce. While the girl was serving everyone at dinner, our hero did not stop watching Daniel. He lost sight of him for a while, but after just a couple of minutes he found him again. Kostya climbed onto the roof of a building under construction and looked down at his charge. It even seemed to him that sometimes he was going overboard with all this surveillance. The guy was worried about his traumatic plan, but he knew that he wouldn't die from this anyway. Kostya was ready to use his strength and test his ward. But he was suddenly interrupted by the appearance of Olga, who came close to Daniel. Kostya was surprised that these two were hanging out together. He even thought that they were close. Just at this time, Daniel blushed very deeply and sweated with excitement. He looked at the girl and asked her if she had thought about the proposal that he had recently made to her. She clearly did not want to continue this conversation because she hesitated at such a question. The girl looked straight at her colleague and said that this would be a little problematic for her. The guy immediately realized that there was no chance for him here, so he decided to just silently agree. And Olga continued to criticize that although he is a good and kind person, she is embarrassed by their large age difference. They also had differences in many other trifles, and if they cannot even agree on this, then disputes will always arise over other trifles. At that moment, the girl enthusiastically said that she hoped to quickly pay off her student loan. For some reason, Daniel began to apologize, which embarrassed the girl a little. Kostya hid on the roof at this time, realizing that he had heard something unnecessary. He was embarrassed because he came only for the quest, but overheard someone else's personal life. The guy looked down again and saw that Daniel was a little upset, so he decided not to touch him now. All he could think was that it was better for him to leave these two alone for now. However, suddenly something changed in his surroundings. There was a strange sound. Kostya realized that just a second ago he had accidentally used force and moved the beams a little. He tried to warn the sweet couple below, even shouted to them to move aside. However, the girl was very interested in the conversation, so she didn't even pay attention. But Daniel saw all the danger and reacted to it instantly. He immediately rushed towards the fragile girl, stretching his huge arms forward. With all his strength, this guy pushed the girl in the opposite direction. Although her landing was not very soft, it still helped Olga avoid meeting the beams falling on her. There was a deafening blow, after which the girl could not see anything for some time through the rising dust. After a couple of minutes, these clouds dissipated, presenting a terrible picture. At the loud, piercing, desperate cry of the girl, all the people in the area began to come running. Olga sat on her knees and, with tears in her eyes, tried to move the huge, heavy beams to the side. The girl kept calling Daniel, trying to understand whether he was still alive or no longer alive. Her hands were bruised, her nails were broken, although not such serious wounds, but she was also injured. After some time, the rest of the workers reached the scene of the incident, and Kostya looked at this whole picture from top to bottom and realized that it was his fault. At this time, builders used various methods and devices in order to free their colleague from under the rubble. Our hero was suspiciously calm and thought only that these sufferings and difficulties would become the basis for achieving his goal. A few minutes later, when the ruins were dismantled, a strange picture appeared to the eyes of the builders. Even Olga noticed that it had become suspiciously quiet around, so she decided to see what was happening. Everyone was amazed that instead of the plump Daniel, there was a very thin guy with his appearance lying on the ground. Just by this time, an ambulance arrived, quickly examined the guy, and took him to the hospital. A few days later, Sergei, Diana, and Kostya came to visit him, who were worried about their foreman. On the hospital bed sat a rather thin and athletic guy with long hair, who turned to the window. Having heard his name, he turned his head towards the visitors and greeted the head of the company. From that moment on, everyone was in absolute shock, because they expected to see their old, plump Daniel. A little later, the guy said that he thought it was his peculiarity. He squeezed hard. He recalled that due to the fact that he constantly and continuously ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner, he could not get rid of weight. During rehabilitation therapy, his body only stopped getting thinner when he used a lot of force. He admitted that he even jumped off the roof once to make sure of this. Although it was reckless, it was able to confirm the guy's expectations. At that moment, the door to his room suddenly opened, and an excited Olga appeared on the rock. Daniel was very surprised by the presence of this girl here, and everyone present was also a little shocked by how exactly she appeared. And at that moment, the girl herself stopped and threw all her things onto the floor. After that, with tears in her eyes, she rushed towards the hospital bed. She ran close to the patient and leaned on his bed, asking if he was okay. Daniel was shocked that the girl even knew where he was. He wasn't worried about himself at all, so he decided to ask the redhead if everything was okay with her own hand. The girl cried all the time and only said that her hand was completely unimportant now. And they continued to bicker cutely with each other, while our hero in the background made bunnies from red apples. After this, Sergei decided to intervene in their conversation, as the head of their company and employer. The girl was amazed that the guy mastered the hunter only thanks to his powers, and this is his real appearance. In fact, she was worried that the guy had lost so much weight due to severe operations. After this, Daniel asked his boss and said that he had one more feature that he would like to show him, after which he freed one hand from the long sleeve, then extended it forward. The guy began to concentrate all his power in one place gradually. It was after this that his hand began to glow and acquired a purple hue. Daniel said that he initially thought it was just a morphosis, but in fact, it was a slightly different feeling, as if something, ready to explode at any moment, bit into his hand. It's like there's a magical force around him, even though he can't use it. Kostya thought that its potential usefulness and opportunity were simply amazing, and at that time he himself made a butterfly from a red apple. Daniel continued to say that with such a feature, he would be able to do a lot. Sergei stopped him, saying that he understood perfectly well what he was getting at. Therefore, he invited the guy to return to the guild as a full member. He also offered to help Daniel better study his new ability. The guy immediately agreed, saying that he would be very pleased to work in the guild again. Immediately after this, Olga became a little embarrassed and asked to talk to her about what they had recently discussed. Daniel immediately understood what she was talking about and became embarrassed in front of strangers. However, before he could finish speaking, the girl took a full lungful of air and screamed loudly. She came close and admitted to the guy that she agreed to be his girlfriend. They were in a rather piquant situation. The girl continued to ask for only one date. Daniel was surprised because earlier she had told him that she was very busy. But all this was only because she is in a guild and has to work hard. To see the guy, the girl told him her entire short life story. In fact, she admitted that she had never been in a relationship before, so she wanted to fall in love at first sight, as happened in many films and books. While the couple was explaining to each other, our hero in the background made a whole cake out of red apples. Olga at this time ended her speech by saying that all this love at first sight does not really suit her. So she invited Daniel to learn everything from scratch with her and go on a first date. After some time, everyone began to leave the hospital for their homes. Just at this time, Kostya thought that Diana looked quite distracted today, so he went up to talk to her. However, the girl was clearly not in the mood for conversation, so she politely said goodbye to him. Of course, Kostya couldn't take her word for it, but he decided to let her go for now. Instead of talking, our guy decided to simply follow Sergei's secretary. He was very surprised at the place the girl came to immediately after visiting the hospital. It turned out that she went straight to the guild's training center. Diana calmly walked up to the horizontal bar, attached her work pass, and walked on. Kostya couldn't just get into this building, so he approached and asked him to arrange a tour for the awakened ones. Immediately after this, he was registered and given a temporary pass. The guy just managed to go inside in time to notice how the girl changed clothes and went into some room. The sign on the door said that this was the guild's training room. Kostya used his invisibility skill and quietly went inside until the doors closed completely. There he saw Diana standing alone in the middle of an empty room, inside of which your power was growing. At this time, the girl was already fully prepared for battle, reaching for her sword that hung on her belt. Then, with a lightning movement, she pulled it out of its sheath and pointed it forward. She grabbed the handle with both hands and took a defensive position. To begin with, the girl began practicing the most basic movements with a sword. Kostya watched her and thought that her movements were good, and she was not deprived of talent. After that, he recalled the last case of the use of magical powers, be it Sergei with a bow. I even remembered Daniel's recently discovered new excellent ability. It took him quite a long time to compare all these facts. Kostya thought that the girl trains every day because he awakened so many people from her environment. After that, he waited until the end of the training and quietly left the center and went home to feed his guardian. The guy was sitting on the floor on his knees in front of the wolf, and his eyes literally glowed. The keeper looked at the huge portion of food on his plate and immediately thought that this was definitely some kind of bribe. Kostya fell in front of him in a low bow, saying that he had no hidden intentions. He admitted that during the quest he helped Sergei and Daniel, but did not help Diana in any way. Recently, the guild announced the possibility of increasing their rank, so the guy thought that the girl was so upset because everyone around her, except her, grew up as hunters. Kostya asked the keeper if he could help someone without directly influencing them. After that, he asked what method he should use to increase the hunter's rank, after which the keeper advised him to listen to the voice in his head. He could give clues, after which he began to eat. Kostya admitted that the girl is capable, and her equipment is quite good, so if she continues in the same spirit, she will be able to rise to the 5th level of swordsmanship. However, Diana could recognize his voice, so he asked the keeper to help him with at least some roses. Although the guy used to say that he did not want to help others, in fact, for him it was something like a habit. He wanted to help without personal involvement. The guardian did not think for long about this request from his new acquaintance, after which he decided to give a final answer. He promised to help if a quest appeared for Diana, because people have something like destiny. Meeting someone like Kostya is also a kind of fate, and a little extra luck. The hero noticed that these words sounded as if they were being spoken by some stubborn old man. After that, the keeper and Kostya went back to the training center to see the girl in action. They used the invisibility skill and watched her from afar, but they didn't have to wait long, because just at that time a quest from Diana appeared. They needed to increase its level in the next 7 days, after which the keeper promised that he would do it himself. The guardian promised to help the girl with the help of telepathy, so Kostya could go about his business for now and look back later. After such strange behavior, the guy noticed that the guardian's behavior very much reminded him of a tsundere. However, he still decided not to interfere with the wolf doing his job, so he went home. There, he decided to change clothes and go to the conference to which Sergei invited him. The guy quickly had a snack and said goodbye to his mother, after which he went to the company. The woman was glad that her son had been quite busy lately and had even found new friends. And at this time, the opening ceremony of a new office was taking place in the conference hall of the Manhwa Guild. Quite a lot of people gathered there who could cover this event in the media. Several individual journalists were invited, who had already set up their cameras and were ready to film. Kostya came almost to the opening itself, so he was amazed by a large number of people. He decided not to go down, but to stay alone on the balcony and watch everything from above. And just in time, because at that very moment all the poems and the speaker came out on stage. It turned out to be Sergei, who immediately thanked everyone who came to the opening ceremony of the new office and decided to personally see the birth of a new project. Kostya sat on the balcony and thought only that from afar his friend really looked like the son of a very rich family. Meanwhile, Sergei continued to say that along with the move of the guild office, they plan to continue recruiting new people into it. At the same time, giving priority to the potential use of their own characteristics and honing their skills, rather than selecting candidates only by the current rank of their magical power, which greatly surprised the specialists gathered here. The chairman snapped his fingers, drawing attention back to himself. As a first step on this path, he announced that today what is happening is not only the opening of a new office of the Manhwa Guild, but the creation of a private educational institution for hunters. Immediately after this, a forest of hands appeared among people who wanted to ask questions. Sergei chose one of them and asked him to voice his question. One reporter rose from his seat and first of all congratulated the company on establishing a new office. He then said that it was previously mentioned that the company was opening an educational institute, so he clarified whether the criteria for admission to the institute would differ from the worldwide standards for measuring the magic rank of an awakened person. Sergei confirmed this information, adding that the criteria for admission to the institute will be the same as the criteria of the guild itself. Then the guy looked out from the whole crowd at one more person who wanted to ask something. He addressed a young lady in a formal suit and glasses who was sitting in the third row. The girl saw a report that said that during an unexpected awakening, Sergei heard a strange voice, and it was thanks to him that they were able to kill the snow panther. Because of this story, many low-ranking awakened people gained hope. More and more hunters who were quite weak before went to recheck their ranks. However, it is worth assuming that this can only happen to the head of the Manhwa guild. Therefore, she was interested in whether educational institutes would not be just a simple squeeze of money from the dreamy awakened ones. Kostya was amazed that all the reporters asked such tricky questions. On the other hand, he understood that such questions do not arise out of nowhere. He understood that everything initially became possible only because of his help. However, Sergei was clearly not at a loss from such complex questions. He thanked the reporter and said that such thoughts are quite understandable because he himself constantly asks himself this question. It is possible that a miracle happened to him. Maybe he was so lucky only once in his life. However, he saw this opportunity, so he decided to grab it with all his might. Such a strange wording of the chairman's answer surprised Kostya a little. And the girl reporter herself also clearly did not expect such a detailed answer from the head of the company. At that moment, Sergei called an invited guest onto the stage, which surprised Kostya. And everyone present was also amazed at what appeared before their eyes. In fact, this very invited guest turned out to be Daniel. He stood next to Sergei and amazed everyone with his enormous size compared to him. The guests were clearly impressed by this huge man. Sergei continued to talk about how Daniel was one of the first members of the guild, and they could only find all the information about him by reading a couple of articles from that time. He admitted that the awakened C rank was a label that constantly followed him, as well as Sergei himself. Then he asked to bring to the stage the very bow that helped him in the last battle. Kostya was surprised that these guys were filled with such determination. And at this time on stage, Sergei defiantly took a bow without arrows and seemed to pull the string. On the other side of the stage, Daniel prepared to repel the attack. He took in as much air as possible into his lungs. After that, the guy also stood up, ready for battle. It took literally a couple of moments for Sergei to begin to gather all his strength together. Just like last time, it was not difficult for him to transform it into an arrow. After that, the guy took good aim and warned Daniel that he was about to shoot at him. All the assembled reporters and just guests were horrified by what was happening on stage. Literally a couple of moments, and after a short sigh, Sergei released the bowstring. An arrow of magical power immediately burst out of his bow and went to its target. Some people even screamed in horror that something traumatic would happen before their eyes. Even the cameramen left their cameras and looked at the stage with all their eyes. And at this time, the arrow reached its target and hit Daniel right in the chest. Sergei calmly lowered his bow and exhaled that everything went well. At this time, a cloud of smoke rose on the opposite side of the stage, hiding everything that was happening behind it. Kostya came to the dwarven village and looked for his old friend in his house. He was surprised by his arrival and asked to warn him next time, although he had said before that he could come at any time. After which the old man laughed and said that all this was said out of emotion. He was just heading to the workshop, so Kostya asked to go with him. The old man agreed to go there together, since the young guy wanted to look at her. After this, the keeper suggested splitting up. He himself wanted to go to Tyler. The hero was even glad about this course of circumstances, and smiled very much. The guardian looked at him and said that even without completing the quests, he was not so weak that any person would take care of him. At this time, the old man was completely oblivious to the fact that two people next to him were almost ready to fight. After that, the company went to the workshop, which was filled to the brim with various types of weapons. Some dwarves were just now engaged in forging new products. A huge magical furnace was flooded, which helped them in their work. The guy admitted that it was quite stuffy in the workshop, just as he remembered the last time. The elder announced a short break for all workers, but Kostya could not stand it, and even took off his shirt. After which the old man noticed that an ordinary person would not be able to enter this room because of the heat, because the average temperature rises to 80 degrees. After that, he summoned a huge piece of magic stone from behind the portal and asked him to make a shield out of it. The elder was delighted with the appearance of this stone, because it was an excellent material that would never be seen on Earth. Kostya admitted that he received it after a battle with that huge panther. He remembered that the world had really tried, since he had never encountered such a monster in the spirit realm. The elder looked at this huge stone and said that his old friend's request would be fulfilled. But he admitted that this metal is too tough for the local equipment, because to create an account you need a very high temperature. But due to the structure of the earth and the absence of the spirit of fire here, their capabilities are very limited. Kostya thought for a minute and concluded that they just needed a spirit of fire, like that cute mole. However, the elder noted that such a spirit of the earth was lucky to be born in this world thanks to the tree, and it is unlikely that they will be so lucky again. In addition, they also needed a place that could withstand such temperatures. Kostya was horrified at how expensive this premises could cost them. Kostya was actually indignant that people were so obsessed with money. However, he admitted that in their situation there is still no choice. Just at that moment, one of the workers called the elder over and they talked about something for a short time. The old man asked Kostya to look around himself, but he needed to go away for a while on business. The guy just had time to think about where he could get such a room. For this reason, he even decided to turn to his guardian, who just returned to him. He didn't look very happy, but after a while he admitted that he had an idea. These words were clearly given with difficulty, but the keeper still said that the fiery fox could help them. Kostya was surprised that this divine beast was still on Earth. However, the keeper also added that the fox was very broken, which greatly surprised our hero. The guardian added that the firefox core would give them the required temperature with extra reserve. However, there was one thing that confused the great divine wolf. The guardian clearly did not want to continue this conversation, but he understood that he had no choice. So he was silent for a little longer, then added that the firefox was broken and devoid of reason. He was once the first guardian apostle, named Ralph, who fought alongside him during the Great Cataclysm and exhausted almost all of his magical and physical power. He gave too much it could not help but leave a mark on him. Kostya listened carefully to everything that the furry guardian told him. Then he decided that he should see everything with his own eyes. He admitted that they would still have to go to him to steal the fox core. After that, the guy squatted down and began to think about their further plan of action. The guardian said that the fox is in the west, in a black valley, where there is a mountain overflowing with demonic energy. There is not a ray of life-giving light there. That cave is teeming with all kinds of monsters. The guy was delighted that he now had the coordinates of Ralph's location. He decided to go there immediately, so he grabbed the keeper by the scruff of the neck, after which he pushed off the ground with force and jumped straight in the direction that the guardian had indicated to him. After some time, they landed not far from the required location. The divine wolf even felt a little seasick from such chaotic movement. However, he quickly came to his senses and began to look around. And there was something to see, because the whole ground was strewn with dead animals. And all this was done by one huge fiery fox, whose mouth was covered in blood. He stood over the small, lifeless animal corpses right in front of them. The guardian was surprised that his former apostle had already come to this. He looked at what was happening, and it seemed to him that he had guessed why reason did not return to Ralph. After all, when divine beasts that do not need food become weak, they instinctively begin to look for something to eat. If he tries to replenish his magical power by absorbing monsters, it leads to only one outcome. Demonic energy is like poison, so if a divine beast swallows a lethal dose, it will suffer an overdose of energy. But before he even had time to finish his sentence, an attack of hot fire immediately flew at him. It went behind him and exploded somewhere behind him, destroying everything in its path. If Kostya had not managed to dodge at the right moment, he would already be dead. The guy was amazed that the fire leaf detected his presence, despite the fact that the guy hit it. However, he was absolutely not going to give him time to think about further actions, preparing for the next attack. In this hot ball of flame, the guy managed to see something strange. He was amazed that divine beasts were using demonic energy instead of divine power. However, at the same time, Kostya needed to defend himself, so he also began to release his energy outward. He had very little time, since the beast had absolutely no intention of waiting for him to prepare. Kostya barely had time to create a shield and protect himself and the guardian from the blow. The wolf only shouted that the fox could not think straight now, so whenever possible, you just need to take away its core without causing harm. Kostya was glad that the guardian was so worried about his former comrade, but noticed that he had not even done anything yet. He also added that if they leave him just like that, it could be a disaster if he becomes a monster. And at this time, the powers of the firefox only increased in volume. Even the ice that Kostya used to freeze his flames began to heat up. With one quick movement towards the guardian, our hero threw him aside as far as possible, after which the shield was destroyed and the attack achieved its goal. The guardian stood aside and just watched as all this flame fell on Kostya. He was horrified that his new friend could die just like that. However, it was too early to give up, because our hero was experienced in this kind of battle. His clothes may have been burnt, but he himself escaped serious consequences. At the last moment, the guy applied force to his legs, which allowed him to jump high into the air. He admitted that the fox's fire was indeed powerful, which was to be expected from someone who had absorbed such a large amount of demonic energy. Kostya decided to first get away from here to somewhere far away and then think about how he could get the core. However, before he even had time to finish his thought, the fox moved into a new phase of the offensive. Our hero, while still in flight, began to be surrounded on all sides by tubers of flame. Therefore, he had to exert quite a lot of force in order to summon a new defensive technique. A whole huge horde of water appeared around the guy, which developed at his order. At this moment, the fiery tubers headed straight towards our hero. They crashed into a huge body of water with which the guy protected himself. This gave Kostya a little time to land calmly on the ground and take a short break. It was at this moment that the hero finally abandoned the idea of preserving the entire forest intact. Even through such a dense shield of water, one of the attacks managed to break through and almost hit our hero. Even such a small blow could cause quite a huge amount of damage behind Kostya's back. The guy noticed that when the body is absorbed by foreign demonic energy, this divine beast is able to demonstrate enormous power. At this moment, our hero was called by the Guardian, who had been standing at a distance all this time. The guy wanted to protect his new friend, so he ordered him not to approach. But the Guardian reminded him that now Ralph should not be perceived as an ordinary living divine beast, because in his current state, he is ready to use any methods and means to achieve his goal. The hero didn't quite understand what exactly the fiery fox wanted to achieve, but she took note of it. The beast suddenly summoned even more of its power and began to approach our hero. It even seemed to Kostya that his whole body had increased somewhat in size. At that moment, he realized that the fox wanted to burn the entire territory to the ground. So in desperation, he rushed towards the Guardian to protect him. The guy clearly didn't have time to run, so he decided to use his magical power. He imprisoned the Guardian in a small space that was completely filled with his mana. Then he placed it in a ball and sent it high into the sky. At this moment, due to the fact that Kostya was no longer using the name of the Guardian, the fox's memory began to revive the memories that he wanted to protect his friend, his master. Making sure that the keeper was safe, Kostya went on the offensive. He opened the portal again, intending to graft his weapon from it. This time it turned out to be his favorite huge sword, which the dwarves had once made for him. Ralph did not stop watching our hero for a second. He only became even more furious because he couldn't get hold of some pathetic person. This next boost made our hero dodge even more often. Kostya stepped a little to the side in order to gain a little time for the attack. He only had a few seconds to come up with his next strategy. The guy grabbed the hilt of the sword with both hands, swinging it with all his might. Now he could only wait for the moment when the fox would come close enough to him, after which Kostya dealt him a cutting blow, applying a huge amount of force. The guy thought that this attack would have at least some effect. However, he immediately noticed that there was something strange about the fox's paws that he had just cut. Literally, a moment later, the paws were reunited, as if there had been no injury. The guy realized that no physical residue would work on the firefox. At this time, he only in vain allowed the animal to get even closer to him. He was already practically inside the mouth of this huge monster. Kostya tried to unclench the jaws with his huge sword, but failed. A huge, fiery fox sent him flying with such force that no normal person would have been able to survive for a long time. As if she felt something, our hero's mother decided to listen to her feelings. Her motherly heart told her something, but the woman thought that she had imagined it. Her intuition did not let her down, because at that moment Kostya was really fighting a very strong opponent. The guy barely came to his senses after such a strong blow from the fiery fox. This was almost the only divine beast left alive, but with all the demonic energy absorbed, the guy was not sure that he could stop it without killing it. Kostya realized that he couldn't get infected with him at half his strength. He needed to take this enemy seriously, but he was still worried about the Guardian's request. And at this time, the fiery fox began to summon a new technique, which was formed into a ball. It was a clod of energy, the very core that Kostya himself was hunting for. The guy looked at the once sacred animal and thought that he should spend as much energy as possible now, so that it would be easier to defeat him later. He hoped that the firefox would pour all the demonic power to the very end into this core. Ralph didn't need anyone's orders, so he himself directed one of his most powerful attacks towards our hero. The guy came up with the idea to cut this clod of energy with his sword. Therefore, he now concentrated only on delivering one precise and clear blow. The core kept approaching our hero with enormous force. At the last moment, the guy realized that he couldn't cut it, so he simply beat it back to the fox. Now the guy realized that it was definitely a core, but he couldn't understand why it was so big. Even the color was too muddy, as if it did not belong to the fiery fox at all. And at this time, the animal seized the moment and attacked the hero with physical force. The guy barely managed to put his sword under the teeth of a huge beast. Meanwhile, right above them, a clot of energy continued to absorb demonic power. The sky became darker and darker from so many dark forces in it. Kostya realized that they were both in danger and they urgently needed to leave this place. However, the fox held the sword in his teeth and would not let go, so the hero had to come up with another plan. Instead of taking out his sword and running away, he decided to use force and simply move the fox along with him. Of course, the animal didn't like this, so it shook its head and made the guy get off the ground. It was at this moment, as they fought fiercely, that a huge stream of energy shot out from the core. Both Kostya and Ralph were thrown with force in opposite directions. A moment later, Kostya came to his senses and decided to look at the place where the cannonball fell. Literally a few centimeters from his feet, a huge black crater was punched into the ground. Kostya had a hard time seeing from this place how things were going there, so the guy decided to get up and see what was happening there. Before he could do this, a huge stream of energy fell on him from behind. The guy managed to jump off him, then turn around and run into the attack. The fox did not waste time. While the guy came to his senses, he decided to attack. It was still hard for Kostya, but he was glad that the demonic energy had already weakened greatly. And even though you still had to put in a huge amount of effort just to dodge, there was light at the end of the tunnel. The guy dodged, delivered small blows, exhausting his opponent. Some strange feeling overcame our hero. He turned around. Some unusual energy came from exactly the place where the core fell. Now the guy managed to look at him closer, and he clearly realized that something wrong was happening. He knew that it was impossible to reach such a state by simply eating meat with demonic energy for a couple of months. The guy was sure that the fox's core was forcibly filled with dark energy, because it was the embodiment of the soul of a divine beast. If the core is destroyed, then this is a big loss for the beast. If you kill it, the core will be destroyed. The guy tried to guess what kind of demon could do this. The hero heard the voice of a fiery fox, who wondered if he knew Karnas. Kostya was amazed that this beast still retained the remnants of its sanity. The guy decided to check this version, so he asked the fox why he was asking him about this. To which the beast replied that this was the only name that remained in his memory, and as soon as he thought about it, his head was splitting. At this time, the guardian, whom he had been looking for all this time, looked down at him. He was now in a different form and was enclosed in a protective bubble. Gradually, he came closer and closer to the face of the fiery fox, who raised his head up and looked at him. He called Ralph, tried to talk to him to help him recognize him. The fox froze for a while as if listening to his words. Kostya decided to take advantage of the moment and finish what he started. Since the guardian won some time, he had to use it wisely. So the guy immediately turned around and headed straight for the hole in the ground. He extended his hand towards the core and tried to grab it. Just when the guy thought he was about to catch him, something went wrong. The guardian continued to call his former friend, trying to reach him. But instead, the huge fiery fox only opened its mouth wide. It instantly slammed shut. The keeper, along with the ball, was locked between his jaws. Immediately after this, all the demonic energy that had been accumulating in him all this time began to come out of the fox. Now, instead of a small white dog, a huge white wolf appeared before him. Animals that were once friends were now standing opposite each other. Now, having decided in his true form, the keeper tried to talk with his former ward. However, the fox did not recognize him, whether in a small form or in a truly large one. Instead, the fiery animal simply grabbed the guardian's throat with force. Ralph knocked him to the ground, crushing him with his entire body on top, immobilizing him. The guardian was angry and frustrated that his charge could not remember him. However, he still needed to continue to defend against his attacks. So our wolf used water magic, which made the fox jump away. The guardian literally built a shield of water with all his paws, which forced him to let go, after which he jumped up and began frantically calling out to our hero Kostya. He said that the core is half of the soul of the divine beast, so if they win, they will be able to return at least half to it. At this time, our hero fought desperately to free himself from the core. The guy literally extended his hand inside the core, but could not do anything else with it. Meanwhile, the firefox was becoming more and more crazy every minute. His grin became even more menacing. His entire mouth was covered in blood. The guardian looked at her former friend and realized that he was in great pain. He literally watched the demonic energy condensing behind him. The fire beast still did not give up, summoning more and more black demonic flames. In response to this, the guardian summoned light drops of water that could resist fire. And our heroes at this time tried to deal with the core of the core. The deeper it sunk, the stronger the recoil, and if the demonic power was burned from within, it could destroy the core. While it is in this state, the beast is in torment, and at the same time the guy himself still had to simultaneously dodge all the attacks of both animals. The guy was angry because he had such painstaking work, and these two animals acted as if he was not here. The hero tried to concentrate in order to set fire to the foreign body and not lose control. He was very afraid that the core would split, but the keeper said that there was nothing to worry about. After all, in fact, the core of this embodiment of the soul is a firefox. As long as it is not destroyed entirely, the core can regenerate and return to its previous form. After such a message, our hero decided to get away from the two animals. He climbed onto one of the tall stone columns that were located in the forest. After the keeper gave permission to break the core, the guy's task became much easier. Now he did not worry about the safety of the integrity of his soul. He could apply more force. And at this time, the fox began to feel that something wrong was happening to his core. Kostya had already found the right place. All he had to do was literally apply a little more force. But at that moment, the fiery fox turned his attention to him. He decided to remove the source of pain that was causing him to suffer. Therefore, he sent a huge stream of energy directly to the place where our hero was now. And literally at the very last moment, the guardian pushed off from the ground and covered our guy with his body. Of course, Kostya saw what happened, so he was worried about his friend. The keeper only said not to worry about him, but to get on with his work. However, he asked the guy to hurry up, because even his strength was not that much. After that, Kostya concentrated even more, putting in the rest of his strength. It was this last movement that allowed him to finally break the core's defenses and shatter it. Immediately after this, the guy was able to exhale calmly, sweat still rolling down his face. Our hero held in his hand a small fragment of the firefox core. Immediately after this, all the demonic energy of the beast disappeared at once. He fell down. Literally, at the last moment, the keeper managed to substitute his shoulder and soften the blow. Only now could the keeper stop worrying about his old friend. After some time, Kostya came down from the cliff and ran towards his keeper. The guy immediately asked if everything was okay with the fiery fox. The keeper replied that he was simply lost in knowledge, but not for long, so that he would also wake up soon. But in fact, he was more worried about the body of the guardian himself. But what was more important was that the wolf was grateful to the man for the return of his comrade. He even touched his forehead with his nose and promised to get better soon. After this, Kostya demonstrated to his friend that the core had split into several parts. The keeper was satisfied with this situation. In fact, he thought that there would be even more damage. These fragments were enough. The fox would be able to recover if he did not absorb demonic beasts in the future. Just at this time, Ralph stretched sweetly and began to wake up. I had just recovered from a long sleep and still didn't fully understand what had happened. The beast was terribly surprised that he saw his old guardian comrade right in front of him. He was in real shock that his master had come with a man. After this, the wolf asked his ward how he was feeling. He was a little confused by what had happened and did not know how best to explain. Then he began to talk about how he thought that everything that was happening was just a dream. He admitted that he had been consumed by this darkness a long time ago. He thought that he was deep in his dreams and it was already too late. He believed this so much that he would even believe that his master had forgotten him. After which the keeper looked at his ward and said that he could never forget him in the world. The firefox replied that he wanted to believe in it. It betrayed the meaning of his life, in which no one would lend him a helping hand. The hero stood nearby and watched the explanations of the two old friends. After this, the keeper invited his ward to go with him. This proposal made the fiery fox very happy because he no longer needed to be alone. But even so, he decided to refuse this generous offer and remain completely where he was. The guardian assumed that he was worried about the restoration, but the fox only slowly raised his head and looked at the night sky. And then he replied that he first needed to restore everything that he had managed to destroy. He said that he could not let the land where the divine beast lived dry up and die. Then he looked at Kostya and asked if he had come for his core. The guy tried to deny it at first, but then admitted everything. The fox noticed that his words contradicted each other. Everything was too obvious. He added that on any other day, with his character, he would have knocked him down and killed him long ago, tearing him in half. But today he helped him, so he forgives him and gives him life. He also noted that even now the guy is capable of tearing apart a weakened divine beast if he just wishes it. People have an evil nature, so with such power he would not spare him, even if it cost the fox his life. However, the owner intervened and said that it was he who brought this man here. This is a brave man who will protect the earth and take the place of the guardian. After this, only the fox realized that this was the great man about whom the owner spoke in predictions several thousand years ago. After that, he no longer looked at the person that way, although he expressed disappointment. The fox noted that he does not believe in a specific person, but in humanity as a whole. Either way, he was going to stay in this place and focus on recovery. Some hostility immediately arose between the fox and our hero Kostya. The Guardians returned to their earthly appearance and promised that even years later, he would definitely return to pick up his comrade. After that, our heroes headed home, leaving the Fire Beast to rebuild everything it had destroyed. In parting, the Keeper added that even if the whole world disappears at once, he will disappear, preserving the memory of his comrade. He promised that he would never be able to forget him, no matter what happened to them. Ralph was delighted with such words from his master. It gave him true joy. After these words, he gladly allowed our heroes to take the remains of his core. Olga had a hard time getting up because she had to carry a lot of things. Beloved guy Daniel turned around at the girl's words and noticed that it was hard for her. Instantly, he ran up to the girl to help her carry her things. Olga was upset that the guy was not caring for her enough. It was an ordinary quarrel between two lovers, which happens to everyone. This situation was witnessed by the head of the company where both of them worked. He asked forgiveness for his subordinate because he carried him with him everywhere. However, the girl did not obey the boss at all. On the contrary, she only shouted at him for being so overworked. She demanded a day off for her boyfriend and also recalled the dangerous performance. That time, everything really worked out with a demonstration of Daniel's strength. His body absorbed the energy and took on its best form. The girl was worried about the fact that in the morning she worked in a restaurant, and in the afternoon she disappeared with business at the guild. She demanded a day off or at least one day when she and Daniel could be together, but he covered her mouth with his hand. Everyone understood that this was not serious at all, so they were not angry. Immediately after this, the driver shouted from the passengers that he needed to leave, so everyone in the group rushed to take their seats. At this time, an abandoned temple stood in the middle of the desert. In its center, there was a dark entrance that allowed one to enter a place never seen before. A small green mouse crept there unnoticed through a gap in the floor. She quietly watched what was happening inside, spied. This strange green mouse had a small camera on its neck that recorded everything that happened. The werewolf looked at what was in front of his eyes and could not understand what these creatures were up to. Very small people rushed back and forth with tools in their hands. A beautiful, dark-haired, slender woman commanded them menacingly. She was worried that the gate was almost completed, but Pasha was not finished yet. The girl was thinking that everyone was working too slowly at that moment when someone called her from behind. Another little man with glasses ran up to her and said that the gate ball was completed. Raisa looked at the small sphere in his hands and was very happy about it. Then she pulled herself together and praised Pasha for doing such a difficult job. She added later that after this she simply had to treasure him. This cute boy was incredibly embarrassed by such open praise. Raisa did not think that on Earth it would take only 3 months to create a ball, but now she held it in her hands. She added that this is only thanks to such a master as Pasha. Thanks to these words, the boy added that in the future, he would be able to make an even more effective device. He said that he understood the essence in general terms, so it would take him about 2 months. However, the girl turned her eyes and said that Pasha, with his abilities, would be enough for a month. The guy was again embarrassed by such praise and promised to try to cope in a month. After that, the girl smiled joyfully and said that this is exactly how she appreciates him. After that, Pasha went back to his laboratory, and Raisa stood and joyfully waved goodbye to him. She did this until the guy disappeared around the corner, after which the smile disappeared from her face. The girl straightened her hair. She was unhappy that she had to constantly persuade and praise the dwarves so that they would at least do something. Although she understood that for a traitor like her, there was no option to be picky. The girl slowly approached the gate step by step and thought that she would not have another chance. She came close to the stand and realized that even if she had created a gate, without the key and battery, she would simply have wasted her energy. She took the ball in her hand and extended it towards this strange installation. She mentally prayed that this would help them achieve what they wanted. As soon as the ball entered the groove, a gate immediately opened in front of the girl. She was incredibly glad that she managed to do everything right. The girl took the key back and thought that it could be used about 9 more times. She hid the ball in a small bag and secured it to her belt, after which she turned to someone and ordered them to go out and not crowd in the dark. Immediately after these words, boys and girls began to appear out of nowhere. They looked exactly like Raisa, but had different hair and outfits. She told them that she was able to achieve everything only thanks to the dwarves and resources. She also added that they all knew that they had an unenviable position. But today's success should have changed a lot. Her subordinates looked down at the girl and listened carefully to her every word. She stood confidently in front of her followers and talked about their successes. Raisa added that today she was more worried than she expected. Her subordinates did not even immediately understand what the girl was talking about. Literally a second after this, the girl sharply looked up somewhere. She directed the force of her blow to one of the inconspicuous corners in the wall. After that it was destroyed, the girl discovered a green mouse spy. She was furious that she hadn't noticed him sooner. She used her power again, trying to get the spy. However, right before her eyes, the green mouse suddenly sparkled brightly. Literally a second later, huge wings appeared. She rushed right next to Raisa, hitting her painfully somewhere in the waist area. The girl immediately noticed that this strange green bird had stolen her bag with the ball. The result of their long, painstaking work was stolen by some spy. Raisa understood that this could not be allowed at all. She was once again convinced that it was indeed a bag from her belt, after which she ordered to immediately mobilize all forces and find the green eagle. Her subordinates were not supposed to act alone, but to attack in groups. Immediately after this, all the boys and girls gathered here took up arms. They were in excellent physical shape, so they rushed in pursuit of the green bird. This werewolf was in the same group as Dasha, our hero's friend. Although he was unable to gather evidence, the situation was quite serious due to the fact that this group managed to build the gate. They were hunting him, and at that moment the eagle was only thinking about what catastrophe would happen if all the gates were activated. At the moment when he was already pressed into a corner, the eagle began to shine brightly again. And the next moment a huge green paw squeezed the guy's throat. With one blow, he was slammed against the wall so that it left a huge dent. The green hand disappeared, but the white-haired man still could not move after such a blow. The huge animal was now leaning on all its paws and trying to run as far as possible. Due to its size, the gorilla could not be afraid of pursuit, but simply throw enemies to the side. Now all his pursuers were afraid to attack him openly. They tried to avoid a direct confrontation with the same monster. Raisa saw the state her warriors were in after meeting this animal. She realized that the gorilla was trying to break through from the outside of the sector. Therefore, the girl summoned a huge black bow with her power. Then she added a black arrow to it, which was created from the same energy. She ordered all her subordinates to gather on the opposite side and block the spy's path. After that, the girl carefully took aim directly at the fleeing creature. She picked the right moment and held her breath for a while. Then she released the arrow, and it rushed straight to its target with lightning speed. It hit the green-furred spy right in the middle of the thigh. Severe piercing pain made the animal scream sharply. At this time, even more warriors managed to run away, who came to the call of their commander. Raisa ordered them to chase the gorilla, because with such a wound it could not run far. At this time, the spy hung the ball around his neck and tried to run away with all his might. He already felt that this wound would not go unnoticed by him. He understood that he needed to get out, but he saw no light anywhere. The wound occupied more and more thoughts in his head with each passing second. His leg also gradually ceased to obey him well. His consciousness became clouded. His vision became worse, as if he was about to collapse from fatigue. He tried his best just to get the message to his headquarters. Suddenly, a very bright light appeared right in front of his eyes. For a few seconds, he even caused the werewolf to go blind and lose his orientation. Immediately after this, he realized that he had fallen into a trap that had been prepared for him. Right in front of the front stood guards with weapons in their hands, guarding the exit. Above them and on the sides were archers who were ready to shoot at any second. And most importantly, the commander of this detachment came out in front of him. Raisa stood and looked down at the driven green animal. She only shouted that the spy had nowhere else to run. It seemed to her that now he must give up, because there was simply no other way out. To her surprise, the huge gorilla only smiled triumphantly instead. The girl did not expect such a reaction at all, so she could not understand what he was going to do. The spy, with the last of his strength, told her that he had not lost yet, after which the huge green gorilla again glowed with bright light. This time, this transformation quickly caused the entire destroyed temple to shake, because delivering a message to the guild was more important than saving one's own life. Raisa stood and looked in front of her. I don't understand what's going on here. The girl was amazed that the cornered animal did not give up. Instead, the beast began to glow a bright green light again, indicating that it was ready to take on a new form. The last transformation was of such incredible proportions that the entire structure began to shake and threaten to collapse. And at this time, Kostya was somewhere in the middle of the forest and noticed a strange sound. The keeper was surprised that the guy was using the brave man's sword to butcher horned pigs. The hero replied that such an artifact of the legendary class cuts like a legendary one. Thanks to the very abilities of this artifact, the hunt was extremely easy and successful. Kostya reported that he heard a strange roar of an incomprehensible animal and suggested that the keeper check it. Belyash was not delighted with such an offer because he had not even fully recovered yet. And the hero himself fell into this place on the way home and suddenly, for no apparent reason, began to chop up the pigs, declaring that they needed to finish for dinner. However, Kostya still suggested going to look at this beast because fights are the most interesting to watch. The guardian said nothing, but thought that the situation looked too serious to simply be an observer. A huge green tail, all covered with durable scales, developed from side to side. Instead of a gorilla, a gigantic crocodile appeared in the huge hall. He threw his opponents in different directions, swallowing some. The Dark Elves looked at their enemy and did not dare to attack. They would be amazed at how easily their brethren die in battle. Raisa was unhappy that her subordinates could not gather their courage. The girl ordered them to immediately restore order in the camp. A squad of archers must keep their distance. Spearmen must stand in a row and prevent the beast from leaving the camp. The crocodile was amazed that just one order from the main one was enough, and the system was already in order. The girl reminded that the beast could not use its left leg, so she ordered to attack there and kill it. In any case, they needed to return the gate ball, and she did not care about the fate of the spy himself. Initially, the crocodile planned to take the ball and find out its key properties and deprive him of them. However, he understood that most likely he would not be able to escape with the ball. Therefore, the awakened one threw the bag with his loot as high as possible. Raisa was horrified by such careless handling of such a great artifact. The spy only thought that the elves were too skilled at archery, so there was no point in trying to escape by air. He clearly had a new plan in mind, and the commander-in-chief looked at it and waited for the next step. In fact, the beast realized that its only chance to destroy the ball was to swallow it. The crocodile slammed its mouth shut with great force, hoping that the ball would break inside it. Raisa was horrified that all the work done recently had gone down the drain. The girl literally saw with her own eyes how the ball shattered into small pieces. She stood in the middle of the hall opposite her almost defeated enemy and watched how he managed to deceive her. The girl was truly furious that this green beast managed to so easily destroy their work. The spy had clearly made a huge mistake, as the commander-in-chief was truly furious. In order to somehow implicate the spy, the girl ordered all the archers to aim at him. The crocodile stood silently, completely surrounded on all sides by opponents. At this moment, he was completely prepared for his imminent, inevitable death. Suddenly, a little girl appeared in the man's thoughts, bleeding from her mouth. The man recalled the last minutes of his beloved daughter's life. All he could think about was that he would soon be able to meet his sweet little Anya. However, something clearly went wrong. Instead of being destroyed, the ball began to work. A huge stream of dark energy was released out of the lock. It pierced the insides of the huge green crocodile, quickly being absorbed into its insides. The beast, ready to die, suddenly raised its head high and black smoke poured out to save it. Even Raisa did not expect such a reaction, but she noticed that something strange was happening to the spy. The girl ordered all the archers to shoot at the same time. Immediately after her words, more than 100 beautiful and well-aimed shooters lowered the bowstring. The crocodile was pierced by sharp arrows into literally every part of its body. Suddenly, as if from a crack, a strange thick smoke began to appear. He was getting closer and closer to the elves, making them worry. Many of them sought help and protection from their commander Raisa. However, only turning to her, they noticed that the girl herself was bleeding. A strange clot of energy of incomprehensible color pierced the girl's body right through. Even one of the Dark Elves could not survive such a wound. While they were worried about their commander-in-chief, dark energy took over the beast's body more and more. The deputy commander was horrified by what was happening and ordered the remaining elves to retreat immediately. All subordinates immediately rushed away from the scene of events, saving their lives. This is exactly the picture that our main character Kostya found, who appeared right above the hole that had formed in the ceiling. The guy had just arrived and was still trying to figure out what was happening here. From this smoke appeared a huge green leg of a monster, which was swollen to incredible sizes. And the once green crocodile himself turned into a huge, strange golem. There wasn't a single living soul left around him. Everyone ran away. One of the elves charged his arrow with dark energy and aimed at the monster. He put a lot of his strength into the last blow, then released the arrow. The elf wanted to avenge his commander-in-chief who died in this battle. However, this was not destined to happen, because at the last moment the monster felt threatened. He turned towards the shooter, which greatly surprised him. A huge beam of energy was suddenly released from the monster's mouth. He was moving straight towards the poor shooter's location. The impact was so powerful that it completely destroyed the entire small balcony on which the elf stood. He would most definitely have been dead if his comrade had not pushed him away at the last moment. The comrade reminded the dark elf that their main task was to prevent information from spreading. The commanders will not return, but they must prevent information leakage and survive. At this moment, the energy began to spread in all directions and strike chaotically. The two elves barely managed to avoid inevitable death and escape deeper into the castle. Our main character calmly watched all this from above. The Guardian even clarified whether Kostya was going to capture these dark elves. However, he noticed that the Keeper himself had forbidden him to do this just recently, to which the wolf replied that this does not apply to other races. After all, karma is given in different quantities depending on the reasons and its volume. Kostya realized that last time the Guardian stopped him, because having harmed a person, he could not become a protector god due to changed karma. The guy also thought that the Dark Elves have the same laws of the world. They value the lives of their relatives and should not kill each other. However, judging by their last reaction and events, the guy was wrong. The Guardian noted that no creature deserves to die. However, the living cannot always avoid conflicts, and this is understandable. Moreover, these Dark Elves are unlikely to benefit people, which is why he asked Kostya as a person. The hero replied that the Guardian too often asks questions that confuse him. The wolf noticed that the guy was too hostile. He may not want to become a protector god, but even so, such statements and actions only prove his immaturity. The hero was irritated by the gap between them, which was always felt at such moments. The guy spread his hands and said that he partially agreed with the words of the keeper. However, his main goal now is to save Dasha's colleague from a scrape. The guy did not hide the fact that the Dark Elves also bothered him. However, at the moment, what interested him most was the black demonic energy. After all, at the moment it was very similar to what had recently been hiding in the fiery fox. Kostya was simply interested in what kind of lousy demon was plotting these intrigues. It was unlikely that this was the work of the Dark Elves. In any case, the hero needed to save the man, so he jumped down. The guy carefully landed right in front of the huge green monster. He just noticed him and slowly turned towards the new enemy. Kostya was not at all afraid of his enemy, turning to Dasha's colleague, locked inside him. The guy called upon his powers in the palm of his hand, promising to free the man soon. Thanks to his abilities, small and large stones began to rise from the ground. More and more of them rose into the air. They glowed with a yellow flame. Gradually, the stones began to twist in a spiral, as if they were in a whirlpool. From such a strain of magical power, even our hero's eyes turned blue. Immediately after this, Kostya directed this entire gigantic flow of energy along with the stones forward. His improvised